Wazu wipes sweat from his brow, his axe resting against a split log as he takes a moment to catch his breath from his labor. He offers a weary smile to his companion, acknowledging her kind words about his character despite the constant comparisons he faces. She continues to encourage him, reminding him that his sister and childhood friend are exceptional, yet he should simply strive to do his best. Returning to his chores, he is interrupted when a young girl calls out to him, breaking the quiet rhythm of his afternoon. The sound of a commotion draws his attention, and he turns to see the girl excitedly announcing that Arya has returned. He joins the gathering crowd, his gaze fixed on the center of the excitement as whispers about the hero's youthful appearance ripple through the villagers. Pushing through the throng, he catches a glimpse of the armored figure, his expression shifting from curiosity to focused observation. As the hero is celebrated for defeating the Demon King, he struggles to see over the crowd, relieved to confirm that Arya is safe amidst the spectacle. He watches as the crowd admires the woman standing beside the hero, noting that despite the passage of time, she remains as radiant as ever. The hero offers her any reward she desires, a gesture that makes him feel a sudden, painful distance growing between them. He reflects on their long history, acknowledging that while they have known each other since childhood, her recent return has brought a new, complex reality. Memories flood back of their shared youth, the promises they made at 12, and the simple, harmonious life they once led together. A bittersweet smile touches his lips as he recalls how she once reacted with fierce jealousy when news of their engagement first spread. He admits that at the time, they truly believed their path was destined to be intertwined forever, a future that seemed so certain. The past shatters as he recalls the day she was chosen as the holy woman, forcing him to confront the hero who questions why a commoner like him would dare to follow them. The hero dismisses his presence, coldly reminding him that their journey is strictly for the subjugation of the Demon King. He is pulled from these dark recollections by a gentle touch, his expression darkening as the weight of those memories settles upon him. She looks at him with hopeful eyes, asking if they can return to the way things were before, leaving him to grapple with the impossibility of her wish. He stands among the crowd, watching as the hero makes a public declaration from the elevated platform, confirming the rumors that have been circulating. The hero pulls her close, boldly announcing his desire to take the holy woman as his wife, a proclamation that leaves him visibly shaken and reeling in disbelief. As the crowd erupts in confusion and murmurs, he is left reeling, his mind struggling to process the sudden, jarring shift in their reality. He finds himself grappling with a fractured memory, unable to recall the events of his 15th birthday or how he even returned home that day. Driven by a sudden, frantic need for answers, he pushes through the gathering, desperate to understand what has transpired. He stares at a hand-drawn picture of the two of them, the ink blurring as tears fall onto the paper, a painful reminder of a bond that feels increasingly distant. He recalls her gentle voice wishing for them to be together forever, a memory that now cuts deep as he pleads for her to stay healthy. A final, cold note rests before him, its message clear. She asks him not to follow her, wishing only for his happiness as she departs with the hero. He walks alone through the dense, silent woods, his expression hardened by the weight of his abandonment. With no path left to follow, he continues his solitary trek into the unknown, leaving his past life behind. The young man sprinted through the dense, overgrown brush, his mind racing with confusion as he questioned why he had been targeted so soon after fleeing his home in despair. He stumbled, his boots catching on the uneven terrain, and he collapsed into the grass, his face twisted in a mixture of exhaustion and mounting panic. As he regained his footing, he realized he had reached the mountain's base, only to be confronted by a bizarre sight. A bipedal fish and a cat-like creature standing in his path. The fish lunged forward with surprising speed, leaving him stunned and scrambling to dodge the sudden, inexplicable assault. He narrowly avoided a flying branch, his heart pounding as he shouted in frustration, demanding to know why a fish and a cat would coordinate to attack him. The impact of the debris sent him sprawling into the dirt, a sharp pain shooting through him as he groaned. That hurt. He looked up at his strange attackers, attempting to de-escalate the situation by dryly remarking that he would likely taste terrible. Standing before the creatures, he wondered aloud if they possessed the intelligence to understand his words, hoping for a moment of reason amidst the madness. He considered the desperate possibility of playing dead to escape his pursuers. The thought was quickly dismissed as the creatures roared, leaving him no choice but to flee. He sprinted toward a rope bridge, reasoning that the path ahead, while dangerous, was his only remaining option. With the bipedal fish and cat-like beast hot on his heels, he scrambled across the swaying wooden planks. He gritted his teeth, realizing he had reached the base of the mountain and had no idea what horrors awaited him further up. Desperately searching for a place to hide, he pushed forward while his relentless pursuers closed the distance. The bridge shuddered violently under their combined weight, prompting him to shout a warning that they were all going to fall. He cursed their persistence, his breath hitching as he continued his frantic dash across the chasm. Suddenly, the bridge gave way beneath him, and he watched in horror as the structure collapsed into the depths. As he braced for the end, the creature landed on the far side, frustrated that its prey had narrowly escaped its grasp. He sat amidst the forest floor, clutching a freshly caught fish, his mind spiraling with the grim realization that his journey might end in this desolate place. Desperation fueled his voice as he shouted into the woods, demanding that his pursuers finally emerge and finish him off. Silence followed his outburst, leaving him to stare blankly at his companion, both of them confused by the lack of response from the shadows. Suddenly, a massive, dark wing unfurled from the canopy above, casting a terrifying shadow over him as he pressed his back against a tree in shock. Towering above the clearing, a colossal black dragon descended, its presence radiating an overwhelming, predatory aura that froze the air itself. Beside the beast stood a skeletal figure, its hollow eyes fixed on the pair, while the dragon let out a low, guttural growl of anticipation. The skeletal entity observed the beast-man companion with cold curiosity, questioning the nature of the creatures before them. He watched in paralyzed terror as the monstrous duo emerged fully into the light, their sheer scale making escape seem like a distant dream. The dragon and the skeleton exchanged words, dismissing him as a pathetic, lost human, their disdain evident in their tone. He stood his ground, trembling, as the massive dragon loomed over him, waiting to see how the fragile human would react to his impending doom. He listened as the dragon dismissed him with cold arrogance, comparing his presence to that of a mere ant before a tiger, claiming they had no interest in him. Confused by the creature's sudden shift in demeanor, he could only stammer a question, struggling to comprehend the situation. The dragon loomed over him, declaring that even if it consumed many small beings, it would never be satisfied, before abruptly turning away. Watching the beast depart, he stood in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the sheer reality of facing a true dragon. Realizing the danger had passed, he decided to retreat, noting that he would surely drown if he attempted to stay in such a perilous environment. As he retreated, he grumbled about the persistence of his pursuers, lamenting that they seemed to have nothing better to do than hunt him. His eyes caught sight of something on the ground, and he moved closer to investigate the discovery. He picked up the item, musing that if even an ant could eat it, perhaps he could survive by doing the same, despite never having seen such training in the guild. He began to peel the object, noting that while the skin tasted terrible, the inside was surprisingly edible, and he realized his guild card could serve as a makeshift tool. Reflecting on his journey, he admitted that he had only joined the adventurer guild to keep pace with his childhood friend, Arya, who was hailed as a hero. He observes the guild card in his hand, noting how it displays an adventurer's status through a series of numbers and symbols. Reflecting on his own limitations, he acknowledges the vast gap between his own abilities and those of his genius, younger sister, Kagani, feeling that despite his efforts, he remains only slightly above average. The mere thought of Arya causes his chest to tighten with a painful sense of inadequacy, forcing him to grip his card tightly as he struggles with his memories. He realizes that dwelling on these feelings is futile while he remains trapped in the forest, noting the surprising sharpness of the card's edge. A sense of helplessness washes over him as he contemplates the impossibility of surviving against S-tier monsters, questioning his own judgment in coming to such a dangerous mountain. He recalls the mountain's reputation as the largest in the continent, a place he once viewed with complete indifference, yet now, he finds a flicker of hope amidst the harsh reality. The environment proves unforgiving, as he recounts how he was battered by a sudden, violent storm, blinded by dense fog, and scorched by the relentless sun. He contemplates his survival, realizing that hiding in a cave between the forest and the mountain was a stroke of fortune, though he remains paralyzed by fear and uncertainty about his next move. His stomach growls, a stark reminder that even in such a dire situation, his basic needs cannot be ignored, forcing him to venture out in search of food. 3 days have passed, and he has come to the painful realization that survival requires him to act, regardless of the danger. He examined his own reflection, noting with alarm how thin he had become after days of deprivation. Desperation gnawed at him as he realized that sheer willpower was insufficient to sustain his body. He needed real sustenance. A cold sweat broke across his brow as the reality of his starvation set in. Clutching his aching stomach, he felt the hollow pangs of hunger demanding to be filled. Driven by necessity, he eventually turned to the only option left, scavenging the remains of beasts left behind by predators. Though the flesh was foul and repulsive, he forced himself to consume it, desperate to keep his strength from failing entirely. The consequences were immediate and terrifying. His tongue went numb, and a paralyzing sensation spread through him, signaling that he had consumed something toxic. He collapsed into the dirt, his body seizing as the poison took hold, leaving him helpless on the forest floor. As his vision blurred, he looked up to see a strange, glowing orb hovering in the night sky, its presence defying explanation. The mysterious light drifted closer, and as he lay paralyzed, he could only watch in confusion as it descended toward him. He watched in bewilderment as the glowing orb halted its descent, hovering directly before him in the darkness. The light suddenly vanished, leaving him in the quiet, suffocating dark of the forest. Lying paralyzed on the forest floor, he could only wonder if the strange encounter had been a mere hallucination. He closed his eyes, struggling to make sense of the phantom light that had appeared to him. In the depths of his mind, a memory surfaced, a girl named Arya, promising that they would marry once he reached the age of 15. The memory shifted to a knight, who demanded the holy woman as his reward for service. He recoiled at the thought, his heart racing as the realization of the knight's claim took hold. With a sudden surge of willpower, he forced his eyes open and found that his body was finally responding to his commands. He sat up, noting that the strange dream had seemingly purged the toxins from his system, leaving him feeling remarkably recovered. Despite his recovery, he remained trapped in the same dire circumstances, forced to continue scavenging for food just to survive another day. He reflected on his time in the wild, wondering how many months had passed since he last interacted with human society. As he surveyed his own appearance, he realized how long it had been since he had spoken to another living soul. He turned his attention to his adventurer's card, recalling that a single drop of blood could reveal his status and skills. Upon activating the card, he was met with a display of his current statistics, though the results were far from what he had anticipated. He stared at the card in disbelief, questioning if it was broken or if he had simply hidden the true information from himself. The sudden surge of confusion overwhelmed him, prompting a reminder that such intense reactions were detrimental to his physical well-being. He carefully examined the card's detailed breakdown, which listed unique conditions like goddess's sympathy and resistance against abnormal conditions, alongside his newly acquired sword skills. He remained fixated on the card, his expression one of profound bewilderment at the strange data presented before him. A sudden realization struck him as he recalled the glowing orb from his dream, wondering if it was indeed the goddess herself. He finally understood that the entity from his dream had left its mark on his card, leaving him to ponder the true nature of his human, purity 100% status. He lay back, staring at the sky, contemplating the strange goddess's sympathy skill and his own perceived weakness. Suddenly, the text on his status screen shifted, and he realized with a jolt that the goddess was not only watching but actively reading his thoughts. Despite the unsettling intrusion, he acknowledged that the divine protection was, in truth, a significant advantage for his survival. He reflected on his past, recalling how he had once felt his stats were lower than zero, yet the unique ability to endure bad food had provided him a glimmer of hope in the wilderness. A realization struck him. If he could maximize the benefits of that specific skill, he might be able to push his limits further. He concluded that this was his only path forward, noting that while the protection didn't grant him total immunity to ailments like poison, it allowed him to endure them. He maintained a rigorous training regimen, consuming whatever he could find and honing his sword skills to ensure his body grew stronger. He estimated that roughly half a year had passed in this grueling isolation, yet he felt the tangible results of his perseverance. He examined his updated status card, noting the cryptic descriptions that remained difficult to fully decipher. He finally understood that his glutton skill was the key to his growth, allowing him to turn the consumption of foul substances into a source of strength. He reflected on the unsettling nature of the goddess's encouragement, finding the casual tone regarding his glutton skill deeply unnerving despite its utility. Memories surfaced of his first monster hunt, a pivotal moment when he realized that the ability to consume his prey was far more significant than he had initially grasped. Despite his growing strength, he remained acutely aware of his vulnerability, knowing that without a weapon, he could never afford to lower his guard. Driven by a desperate hunger, he scoured the forest, praying for a beast that would provide him with a substantial meal. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush caught his attention, and a sharp grin spread across his face as he realized his prey had arrived. Peering through the foliage, he spotted a large, gelatinous slime resting in the clearing. His expression fell into one of profound disappointment. This was certainly not the meat-bearing beast he had been hoping for. The young man sighed in frustration, his stomach growling as he lamented the appearance of a slime when he had been hoping for a hearty meal of meat. He watched the gelatinous creature with a wry smile, dryly remarking that it looked like he would be having jelly for dinner after all. Suddenly, his expression shifted to one of alarm as he realized the slime was dissolving the bamboo sticks he had been using, forcing him to acknowledge his own overconfidence. His eyes widened in shock as he witnessed the creature melting a nearby rock, the sheer potency of its acidic touch dawning on him. He recalled the lessons of seasoned adventurers, who always maintained their distance and targeted the creature's core, utilizing long spears or fire arrows to stay safe. Contemplating his next move, he watched the slime continue its destructive work, his mind racing to find a solution. The creature suddenly spat a glob of acid, narrowly missing him. He scrambled back, realizing the danger and desperately searching his surroundings for any viable weapon. He grabbed a rock, deciding that even if it seemed futile, he had no other choice but to try and fight back. With a determined shout, he hurled the stone at the slime, committing himself to the desperate struggle. He stood amidst the forest, bewildered by the sudden effectiveness of his strike, wondering if a single blow had truly been enough to fell his opponent. Reflecting on the aftermath of his first battle, he realized that surviving in this wilderness required constant learning, though the time spent gathering slime remnants had been unexpectedly long. He turned his attention to the cave wall, meticulously carving symbols into the stone to mark his progress and keep track of the monsters he had encountered. Satisfied with his tally, he surveyed the wall covered in crude drawings of various beasts, confirming his progress with a determined nod. With the task complete, he allowed himself a weary chuckle, acknowledging the sheer variety of monsters that inhabited these woods. Having thoroughly explored the surrounding forest, he realized that the only uncharted territory remaining was the looming mountain in the distance. He sat in the quiet of the cave, frustrated that despite his travels, he had not grown significantly stronger, yet he remained convinced that the mountain would hold a greater challenge. Deciding it was time to move on, he focused on the immediate comfort of a meal, attempting to maintain a semblance of his former human life. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar, nagging voice criticizing his tattered appearance, offering to mend his clothes if he would only stop looking so disheveled. He looked down at his makeshift gear, crafted from monster materials, feeling a pang of sadness at his situation while accepting that he had to continue his preparations for the mountain. He gazes toward the looming mountain under the night sky, resolving to depart for its heights by the following morning. Reflecting on the passage of time, he notes that a year and a half has slipped by since he fled his home, and he pauses to check his status. He recalls the ritual of drawing blood onto his guild card, realizing with a grim sense of detachment that even the fangs of monsters no longer leave a mark upon his skin. A sense of unease washes over him as he contemplates his humanity, now reduced to a mere 88%, and wonders what has become of the rest. He observes the evolution of his skills, noting that his consumption of tainted food has upgraded his ability to super glutton, while his status growth has reached a dangerous maximum. Startled by a sudden presence, he realizes that his rapid growth has surpassed even the goddess's expectations, leaving him to wonder if he can ever truly return to civilization. He pushes forward, acknowledging that the local monsters no longer pose a threat, and reaffirms that his true goal in climbing the mountain is to discover the limits of his own strength. As the sun rises over the jagged peaks, he stands alone, silhouetted against the vast, unforgiving landscape. He pauses to admire the breathtaking beauty of the morning light, momentarily finding peace in the solitude. The tranquility is shattered as his senses sharpen, alerting him that something powerful is rapidly approaching. He paused mid-ascent, his eyes widening as he realized the source of the encroaching presence. Before he could react, a monstrous, horned beast lunged from the shadows, its claws tearing through the air. The sudden assault was interrupted by a massive, dark-scaled dragon that descended with overwhelming force, grounding the attacker. With a swift motion, the dragon clamped its jaws around the beast, lifting it high above the ground while he watched in stunned silence. He gasped, his breath hitching as the reality of the dragon's sudden appearance set in. The dragon turned its gaze toward him, questioning aloud how a mere human had managed to reach such a desolate, dangerous place. Surrounded by the eerie, dark woods, the dragon demanded to know who had brought him to this forbidden territory. He calmly replied that he had walked there alone, a response that only seemed to provoke the dragon's ire. Seizing the moment of distraction, the horned beast broke free, taunting the dragon for its lack of focus. As the beast prepared to strike, he realized with shock that the creature he thought was dead was very much alive and ready to kill. He barely registers the sudden command to silence the demon before the dragon's overwhelming presence dominates the immediate vicinity. Stunned by the creature's casual claim that this desolate slope is its backyard, he finds himself questioning the absurdity of the situation while lamenting the blood staining his clothes. The dragon dismisses him with a cold instruction to leave, leaving him momentarily speechless at the creature's arrogance. He retorts with frustration, wondering aloud if the beast is simply too dim-witted to understand human speech or if it is intentionally ignoring him. The dragon tilts its massive head, its glowing eyes narrowing as it demands to know what a mere human is doing in such a place. He maintains his composure, offering a nonchalant reply that he is simply passing through, despite the clear danger radiating from the beast. The dragon scoffs at his presence, revealing its true intent. It is scouring the land for any being stronger than itself. With a predatory grin, the dragon challenges him, mockingly suggesting that he face the Dragon King as his next opponent. He offers a sharp, knowing smirk, retorting that he has never heard of anyone else claiming the title of Dragon King before. The dragon looms over him, its massive form casting a long shadow as it declares with chilling confidence that it will spare his life. The massive dragon loomed, its presence a crushing weight as it reflected on the foolishness of the challenge it had just accepted. He stood his ground, his expression hardening with a grim resolve that belied the overwhelming power before him. With a sudden, violent surge, the beast lunged, its claws tearing through the air toward him. The scene shifted to the quiet, distant spires of a town, far removed from the dragon's fury. In the bustling capital market, a young woman with twin tails caught up with an acquaintance, sharing news of her recent travels and her ongoing search for a man named Wazu. They exchanged light-hearted banter, with the man noting that Wazu was known for his ability to disappear, though he remained optimistic about their chances of finding him. She sipped her drink, confidently asserting that Wazu would be completely lost without her guidance. The man chuckled, suggesting that perhaps Wazu was simply avoiding them, and urged her to continue her search with haste. As the conversation turned to the market's half-price sales, she expressed her gratitude, though the search for Wazu remained fruitless after a year and a half. They discussed the possibility that he had traveled far beyond the northern mountains or the southern villages, leaving his current whereabouts a complete mystery. She laughed off the suggestion that he might have found a girlfriend elsewhere, dismissing the idea entirely. Startled by a sudden accident, she dropped her cup, drawing concerned attention from those nearby. As the commotion settled, she apologized for the mishap, insisting it was merely a faulty cup. A passing peddler offered his assistance, claiming his travels through many towns allowed him to help those in need. Far from the market, the atmosphere shifted violently as a lethal command echoed through the air, demanding death. He stood his ground, catching the dragon's massive claw with his bare hand, mocking the beast for failing to kill him as promised. The dragon grew agitated by his nonchalance, prompting him to realize it was time to stop holding back. He revealed his true intent. He had sought out the Dragon King specifically to test his own strength against its many openings. With a sudden, overwhelming surge of power, the dragon unleashed a torrent of fire, engulfing the area in flames. As the smoke cleared, he knelt amidst the devastation, cursing the intensity of the assault. He stood amidst the smoldering ruins, completely unscathed but utterly dismayed to find his clothes had been incinerated by the dragon's assault. The dragon, towering over him, expressed disbelief at his calm demeanor, questioning how he could remain so composed after surviving such a lethal blast. He retorted that he was far from calm, lamenting that it had taken him 3 months to craft the garments that were reduced to ash in a single heartbeat. He gestured toward the surrounding devastation, urging the beast to observe the sheer scale of the destruction caused by its fire. The ground beneath them groaned, glowing with intense heat as the very earth began to melt under the dragon's residual power. He pointed out the molten state of the terrain, incredulous that the dragon's only response to such a catastrophic environmental shift was a dismissive remark. Frustrated by the banter, the dragon roared that it would simply end the duel now, refusing to stand by and listen any longer. He braced himself, his mind racing to formulate a counter-strategy as the massive creature lunged forward with renewed, lethal intent. A massive shockwave tore through the area, causing the dragon to pause and wonder if it had perhaps exerted too much force. As the dust settled, the dragon collapsed, exhausted by the exertion, while he remained standing, watching the creature's defeat. He stared blankly, realizing that his survival was far beyond the capabilities of any ordinary human. The dragon suddenly stirred, greeting him with a sharp, toothy grin that broke the tension of the aftermath. He remained seated on the barren ground, retorting that he was only naked because the beast had incinerated his clothes. The creature chuckled, dismissing the talk of clothes to focus on the fact that the victor of their duel was already decided. He clarified that he had no desire to kill the dragon, despite the creature's confusion over why he hadn't claimed its life. The dragon erupted into laughter, finding it absurd that the human had fought so hard only to end up without a change of attire. Offering a gesture of goodwill, the beast invited him to its castle to find something suitable to wear. He looked up, surprised by the sudden hospitality, and asked if that was truly acceptable. The dragon simply assured him that it was fine, setting aside their previous hostility. Standing atop the cliff, the dragon introduced itself as Ragnar, prompting him to identify himself as Wazu, a genuine human. He marveled at the breathtaking view, praising the Dragon King's domain. The dragon, Ragnar, invited him to use his name freely, noting that the payment for their previous clash had already been settled. Soaring through the sky, they approached the massive, imposing structure of the dragon's castle, which stood majestically against the horizon. Upon landing, he was struck by the sheer scale of the architecture, remarking that it far surpassed the grandeur of the Iskoa royal castle. Ragnar, however, seemed slightly offended, questioning if his home was not magnificent enough. Because he was completely unclothed, the dragon insisted he could not wander the halls in such a state. When he asked where he might acquire new garments, the dragon readily agreed to assist him. As they entered the castle, he couldn't help but observe that the dragon's pride was as immense as its physical form. While exploring the balcony, he was suddenly startled by an unexpected sound, his expression shifting to one of confusion. He reached out and scooped up a small, winged creature that had appeared, cradling the soft, mysterious being in his hands. The creature let out a high-pitched coo, causing him to jump in surprise at the sudden noise. Sensing someone approaching, he looked up just as the creature nuzzled against him, while heavy footsteps echoed on the floor nearby. He was suddenly confronted by a group of strangers who demanded to know why he was standing there naked, leaving him flustered and scrambling to explain his presence. The young man stands in the quiet, his gaze fixed forward as a small, winged creature rests atop his head, observing the tense figures gathered before him. Because of the sudden stillness, the creature shifts its weight, its small claws digging slightly into his hair as it watches the scene unfold with wide, alert eyes. He remains composed, though his eyes narrow as he assesses the two formidable opponents standing across from him, a fierce werewolf and a dark necromancer. In a sudden burst of motion, the combatants clash, the air crackling with the intensity of their confrontation as they trade blows in the confined space. As the sparks fly, he calls out to his ally, Neil, demanding to know the nature of the dark, lightning-like energy manifesting before them. The adversaries continue their taunts, the necromancer chanting dark incantations while the beastman growls, eager to claim his prize. He grins, his expression hardening into a challenge as he prepares to face them head-on, fully embracing the fight. The sudden commotion draws his attention to the aftermath of the skirmish, leaving him bewildered by the chaos that has erupted around him. Towering over the scene, the great dragon descends, its voice booming as it demands a full explanation for the disturbance. The massive dragon commands the group to settle down and dress themselves, leaving the protagonist visibly flustered and intimidated by the sudden shift in tone. It introduces itself as Meryl, the mother of the small creature present, and identifies the other dragon as Ragnar, her husband. The mother dragon observes the protagonist closely, noting that her daughter has clearly developed a strong affection for him. He reacts with surprise, questioning the rarity of the creature's attachment while the small being rests comfortably atop his head. Ragnar expresses lingering skepticism, questioning the protagonist's intentions, but the mother dragon reminds him that their daughter chose this companion herself. She declares her decision, stating that she will place her trust in the one whom her daughter trusts. Ragnar concedes, admitting that while he remains cautious, he respects their daughter's desire to stay with the young man. The father dragon finally relents, formally entrusting the care of their child to the protagonist. He reflects on his own feelings, realizing that since meeting the small creature, he has felt an unwavering urge to protect her, even at the cost of his own life. As the pair plays together in the clearing, an observer watches them, noting the genuine joy they share. He stood under the watchful gaze of the skeletal figure, who openly doubted his ability to care for the four of them. Watching from the window, the group observed him waving, noting that despite his appearance, he did not seem like a bad person. The individual with the sharp grin remarked that his kindness only made him more annoying, while Mir chirped in protest. He simply smiled, acknowledging the sentiment with a brief, affirmative response. The atmosphere shifted to a shared meal, where the dragons and their companions gathered, the protagonist finding a moment of quiet connection with Mir. Reflecting on the peaceful days spent with Meryl, he realized that the suggestion to take Mir into the outside world had been a test of his worthiness. With Mir perched atop his head, he announced that it was time for them to depart. The skeletal figure issued a stern warning, promising lethal consequences should any harm befall the young dragon. They emphasized the need for him to remain earnest and bold in his new role. He accepted the charge with a confident, unwavering promise. He waves a cheerful farewell to the dragons, encouraging them to enjoy their freedom as he prepares to depart. As he ventures into the forest, he realizes he has returned to the same area where he was previously trapped, only to be confronted by a familiar, aggressive beast. Without hesitation, he strikes the creature down with a swift, powerful blow, clearing his path once more. With the threat neutralized, he pauses to consider his next move, wondering where he should head now. Recalling the divine guidance available to him, he decides it is the perfect moment to seek the goddess's help. A sudden, mystical light manifests before him, signaling the arrival of a divine response. The guidance points firmly toward the east, though it warns that traveling in that direction might bring him some misfortune. He accepts the omen with a grim smile, resolving to follow the path regardless of the potential trouble. With his course set, he begins his journey eastward, trusting in the divine word to lead him forward. As he travels, he encounters a mysterious hooded traveler, and after clarifying that he is not a bandit, he strikes up a conversation with the stranger. He watched the traveler approach, surprised to find anyone else traversing this obscure path after being guided here by divine intervention. The stranger introduced himself as Shiro, a peddler, and they exchanged pleasantries, with the traveler promising to purchase wares during their next encounter. Shiro mused on the nature of their connection, noting that they seemed to be of a similar age, which made the prospect of friendship feel natural. With a cheerful wave, the peddler solidified their newfound bond, declaring them friends before turning to depart. He bid the peddler farewell, suggesting they share a meal should their paths cross again in the future. As he reflected on the pleasantness of human interaction, a sudden, sharp whistle cut through the air, an arrow streaking toward him. Reacting with lightning speed, he caught the projectile midair, his expression hardening instantly. His eyes narrowed, burning with a cold, dangerous intensity as he scanned the surroundings for the assailant. A feral grin spread across his face, his voice dripping with menace as he demanded to know who dared to target him. With a surge of killing intent, he locked onto the distant figure and vowed to end them. He held the elf captive, his hand gripping her hair as he taunted the others, threatening to harm her if they dared to approach. The group stood frozen in helplessness, their expressions twisted with frustration and fear for their companion's safety. With a cruel smirk, the captor whispered that he would take good care of her, silencing the terrified elf as she pleaded for help. They watched in agony, paralyzed by the realization that any rash action would only put Sheena in greater danger. Suddenly, the tension was shattered by a sharp, unexpected sound, drawing the captor's attention away from their hostage. He stepped into view, his gaze cold and questioning as he demanded to know who had fired the arrow that had just struck. The captors turned toward the newcomer, confused and wary, wondering if this stranger was an ally or another threat. One of the men sneered, dismissing the interruption while greedily eyeing the potential profit to be made from capturing a white dragon. He didn't hesitate. With a swift, decisive movement, he closed the distance and struck the man down before he could react. The impact was brutal, leaving the attacker crumpled on the ground as the others looked on in stunned silence. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension as he demanded they halt their actions immediately. The captors sneered, justifying their cruelty by claiming the elf was a practitioner of dark magic against humanity. Unfazed by their rhetoric, he questioned the true motive behind their aggression, asking if she was merely being sold for a high price. Before they could respond, he lunged into the fray, his movements a blur of precision as he struck down the aggressors and secured the safety of the captives. One remaining assailant saw an opening, thinking he finally had a chance to strike back. The elf intervened, urging him to stand aside as she prepared to face the final threat herself. With a swift, decisive strike, the final attacker was neutralized, leaving the group stunned by the sudden turn of events. As the dust settled, she marveled at the display of power, thanking him for his intervention. The rescued group gathered around, expressing their profound gratitude to the stranger who had saved them. He remained humble, dismissing his heroics and insisting that their safety was the only reward he required. He listened as the elf, Sheena, expressed her desire to properly thank him, asking if he would accompany her back to their village. Accepting the invitation, he followed her to their home, a village nestled high within the trees, though he couldn't help but notice the lack of stairs. As she effortlessly ascended to the elevated dwellings, he stood below, bewildered by the magical display and admitting his inability to fly. She laughed at his predicament, teasing him about his stunned expression while suggesting he simply jump up next time. Once inside, he was warmly welcomed by the villagers, sharing a meal and enjoying the hospitality of the home he had helped protect. The atmosphere remained light as the villagers questioned his motivations, finding his decision to travel for such a simple reason quite fascinating. They marveled at his combat prowess, noting that his movements had been too fast for their eyes to track during the recent skirmish. He humbly accepted their praise, though he remained modest about the strength he had displayed while defending them. Later, he reflected on his journey, feeling a sense of accomplishment as he looked out from the mountain village under the night sky. The peaceful moment was abruptly shattered when he sensed an unexpected presence lurking nearby, prompting him to turn toward the darkness. He breathed a sigh of relief, noting that his clothes had miraculously escaped the bloodstains of his recent battle. Seeking to wash away the grime, he submerged himself in the cool water, musing that he should find a proper bath the following day. As he drifted in the current, he reflected on the day's events, feeling content that he had managed to make several new acquaintances. He found himself admiring the magic displayed by Salona, wishing he possessed the skill to wield such power himself. Unbeknownst to him, a pair of eyes watched from the dense shadows of the nearby trees. Emerging from his thoughts, he realized 3 days had passed, and the refreshing water finally prompted him to prepare to leave. Suddenly, he caught sight of Salona emerging from the water, her presence striking and unexpected in the quiet forest. The realization of their shared proximity caused her to flush with embarrassment, a reaction that left him equally stunned and flustered. In her panic, she instinctively unleashed a powerful gust of wind magic, inadvertently chanting a lethal incantation that sent him reeling. Left alone in the water, he could only stare in shock, realizing with a sinking heart that he had made a grave mistake. He watched as the elf, Salona, struggled with the weight of her own magical outburst, her expression shifting from a dark, mocking confidence to one of genuine, flustered concern as she realized the gravity of her mistake. The young traveler prostrated himself on the ground, his voice thick with mortification as he apologized for the accidental intrusion upon her privacy. She laughed off the incident, her demeanor light and forgiving as she stood alongside her companions, easing the tension of the moment. She continued by offering her own apology for the magical attack she had launched earlier, though she quickly assured him that she held no lingering anger over his arrival. He watched her with a mix of surprise and admiration, noting that it was the first time he had seen her act with such casual grace, admitting that her presence had completely eluded his senses. She noticed his hesitant expression and urged him to simply put the previous day's events behind them. With a firm nod, she declared that she would forget everything, though she added that she still intended to report the incident to the village chief to let him handle the matter. As the conversation shifted, she revealed that her earlier hostility had been a jest, noting that the village chief held him in high regard for his recent efforts in saving the village's child. She then gestured for him to remain, suggesting that if he had no pressing business, he was welcome to stay in their company. He smiled warmly as he turned his attention to the small, winged creatures nearby, clearly charmed by their presence and the sudden shift to a peaceful atmosphere. He stood with his companions as the elf girl announced her intention to speak with the village chief, promising to share more details about the settlement later. With a final exchange of pleasantries, they parted ways, the air light with the promise of a future meeting. Moments later, the tranquility was shattered as a massive, horned beast charged toward them, its heavy hooves thundering against the earth. She reacted instantly, drawing her bow with practiced precision, her expression hardening into one of focused determination. As the creature lunged, she unleashed an arrow, the projectile striking true and forcing the beast to growl in sudden, sharp pain. He signaled his readiness, his eyes locked onto the threat as he prepared to engage. The beast roared, but he held back his full strength, carefully maneuvering to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary destruction. With the creature subdued, they stood amidst the forest, the tension dissipating as they acknowledged their successful defense. They gathered around the fallen beast, noting how well they had coordinated their efforts to protect the village's borders. Laughter followed as they marveled at his hidden strength, finally understanding the true nature of the protection he provided. He and his companions shared a light-hearted moment, noting that even the composed Salona would be surprised by the sheer volume of their successful haul today. They mused that Salona, as the head of the Guardians, was rarely caught off guard, yet the day's events were truly exceptional. The mood shifted abruptly when they realized something was amiss, though they acknowledged that Wazu-san's presence had allowed them to finish their tasks earlier than expected. A sudden, chilling revelation cut through their conversation. A giant scorpion had emerged on the hunting grounds. As the tension mounted, a figure identified as Gazuna appeared, urging them to remain calm while confirming that Salona was indeed the one currently facing the threat. Because of the urgency, Gazuna pleaded for assistance, explaining that Salona was locked in combat near the large tree and that there was also a wounded person in need of aid. He felt a surge of concern for the elf, but Gazuna quickly offered to dispatch a rescue party to handle the situation. Despite the offer, his companions remained wary, whispering that they could not trust Gazuna's word, yet he insisted that he was still capable of fighting and needed to go. Without further hesitation, they sprinted toward the large tree, desperate to reach the site of the battle. Upon arriving, they were met with a harrowing sight. Salona stood alone, dwarfed by the massive, armored scorpion looming over her. He arrived to find the elf shielding a wounded traveler, her expression hardened by the resolve to protect those behind her. She stood firm, internally steeling herself against the encroaching threat, refusing to let the monster reach the nearby village. The creature struck with overwhelming force, forcing her to prioritize the safety of the civilian as she desperately pushed him out of harm's way. Seeing her struggle, he called out to her, his voice cutting through the chaos of the forest. The massive scorpion lunged, its tail whipping through the air with lethal intent. Horror washed over him as he watched the beast strike connect, his shout of her name lost in the sudden impact. She was thrown back, her body limp as the force of the blow took its toll. A guttural cry of agony escaped him, fueled by the sight of her fallen form. Driven by a sudden, explosive surge of adrenaline, he lunged at the monster, demanding to know what it had done. With the beast momentarily repelled, he scooped her up into his arms, retreating to safety while keeping his eyes locked on the threat. He stood amidst the dust, having dispatched the threat with a single, decisive blow, while his companions looked on in stunned silence. Turning his attention to the fallen elf, he knelt beside her, his expression softening as she slowly regained consciousness and whispered his name. She scanned the immediate area, her voice trembling as she asked about the scorpion, only to be reassured that the beast had been dealt with. He insisted on carrying her back to the village, citing her injuries, though she hesitated, questioning if she could manage to walk on her own. Ignoring his own disheveled state and the grime covering his clothes, he remained focused entirely on her well-being. She attempted to stand, still insisting that she was capable of walking, despite the clear pain etched across her features. As they prepared to move, a sudden, ominous presence loomed behind him. The scorpion had not been defeated, but was rising once more. The others screamed a warning, their eyes widening in horror as the massive creature lunged forward with renewed, lethal intent. They shouted for him to target the beast's eyes, while she desperately tried to pull him out of the creature's immediate path. She cried out in a panic, demanding that he release her so he could defend himself against the impending strike. She and her companion narrowly evade the scorpion's sudden strike, leaving the elf stunned by the creature's unexpected resurgence. The shock is shared by all, as they stare in disbelief at the monster that refused to stay down. With a swift, decisive motion, the protagonist lunges forward to intercept the beast's renewed aggression. He glares at the creature, his voice calm, but firm as he remarks on its relentless nature. Focusing his energy, he unleashes a concentrated blast of power, determined to end the threat once and for all. As the dust settles, he signals for the group to retreat, the danger finally neutralized. They arrive at the elven village, where they are greeted with relief by the local inhabitants. The villagers express their gratitude and concern, acknowledging the harrowing ordeal the group has just survived. Amidst the warm welcome, he remains observant, his gaze scanning the faces of those who have come to greet them. His attention sharpens as he locks eyes with a stern-faced elf, a flicker of recognition passing between them. He watched as the elf offered food to the small dragon, her gentle insistence coaxing the creature to eat for its health. As the dragon vanished from sight, he stood alone in the quiet forest, left with only his thoughts. Turning his attention back, he heard her call out his name, Salona-san, her expression soft and attentive. She suggested they walk home together, and he readily agreed to accompany her through the woods. Walking side by side, she expressed her lingering concern for his wounds, a sentiment he acknowledged with a grateful smile. The quiet stroll triggered a memory. He realized it had been quite some time since they were last alone together. An internal panic flared as he worried about her perception of him, fearing that his past actions might have left her wary or disgusted. Their footsteps crunched on the path as she broke the silence, calling his name with a simple, affirmative tone. Stopping abruptly, she asked if they could pause for a moment, and he gave a brief, compliant nod. Under the night sky, she thanked him for the day, leaving him momentarily stunned and questioning the reason for her gratitude. He listened as she expressed her sincere gratitude for his intervention, her voice soft and filled with relief. He quickly countered her thanks with an apology, lamenting that he had arrived too late and allowed her to be harmed. She dismissed his self-reproach, gently insisting that his kindness was what truly mattered. Reflecting on their journey, she admitted that she had long considered herself the strongest and most capable in the village, a belief that now felt challenged. He felt a flush of embarrassment, humbly insisting that he was nothing compared to her. As they sat together, he found himself internally bewildered by the sudden shift in their dynamic, struggling to process her unexpected vulnerability. She looked at him with newfound admiration, openly acknowledging that he had surpassed her in strength. Caught off guard by her direct praise, he could only stammer in confusion. She watched him closely, contemplating the implications of his presence in the village and the growing bond between them. Under the quiet night sky, he tried to brush off the intensity of the moment, though the air remained thick with unspoken feelings. He stands alone in the shadowed woods, a cloaked figure surveying the aftermath of a recent struggle. His brow furrows as he contemplates the unexpected defeat of the scorpion, his expression hardening with cold realization. A dark, swirling aura erupts around him, signaling his intent to intervene directly as he flexes his clawed fingers. He dismisses the human's interference with a sneer, deciding that he can no longer remain a passive observer and must take matters into his own hands. Surrounded by monstrous beasts, he declares that the time for action has finally arrived. He reflects on his origins, recalling how he grew up on a mountain filled with S-rank monsters, where he eventually crossed paths and befriended the Dragon King, Ragnar. The journey continued as he took on the responsibility of guiding the Dragon King's daughter, Mir, through the outside world. Their travels led them to an elven village, where he had previously intervened to save the inhabitants from a human attack, a heroic act that brought him closer to the village guardian, Serona. A week passed peacefully in the elven village, with the morning sun rising over the quiet settlement. The tranquility was shattered when Serona rushed to him, visibly distressed, and urged him to help protect the village from an unfolding crisis. He looked at her, confused by the sudden urgency, as she insisted he come down immediately. Upon arriving, they were met with a chilling sight, a massive, ominous gathering of figures surrounding the village. She watched the encroaching threat, realizing that the time for action had finally arrived. She stood firm as Kazuna proposed a match between them to determine the village's next guardian, his expression twisted into a confident, predatory smirk. The sudden declaration caused a stir among the onlookers. Wazu and the others rushed forward, bewildered by the abrupt turn of events. He scanned the crowd, his confusion mounting as he demanded to know what was happening, only to be met with the tension radiating from the two combatants. It became clear that Kazuna had formally challenged her to a duel, drawing the attention of every villager present. The terms were laid out with cold precision. The victor would claim the title of head guardian, while the loser would be forced into exile from the village. Observing the scene, Wazu realized the underlying motive. Kazuna had long harbored a deep-seated jealousy toward her formidable strength. With no objections raised, Kazuna gestured to the ground, signaling the creation of a magical barrier to contain their fight. He declared the area an invulnerable territory, invoking the ancient agreements that governed their people. As the dome of light solidified, Wazu recognized the advanced elven magic at play, and the duel officially commenced. Without hesitation, Kazuna lunged forward, his voice cutting through the air as he announced that it was his turn to strike. He unleashed a ferocious strike, the sheer force of his blow sending Serona skidding backward across the ground. Watching from the sidelines, the onlookers voiced their support, urging her to stand firm against his aggression. With a twisted grin, he taunted her, goading her to prove her worth as the crowd looked on in anticipation. She stood her ground, questioning his bitter accusations, while he insisted that her very presence was the root of his grievances. His eyes burned with malice as he declared that the impending outcome would be entirely her responsibility. Confused by his cryptic hostility, she demanded to know the true meaning behind his words. The spectators murmured amongst themselves, equally baffled by the dark turn the duel had taken. He reached a breaking point, his face contorted with rage as he vowed to exact vengeance upon those who had rejected him. A dark, pulsating orb manifested in his hands, its presence radiating a sinister energy that defied the natural order. As the onlookers sensed the unnatural aura, he claimed this forbidden power would finally grant his deepest desires. He unleashed his dark power, and immediately, the earth began to tremble with a low, ominous rumble. The tremors intensified, causing the ground to crack as monstrous shapes emerged from the shadows. Observing the chaos, the group confronted him, demanding to know what he had done to summon such destruction. Before he could answer, a piercing scream echoed through the air as the realization dawned on them. A horde of monsters was rapidly closing in. With a twisted grin, he declared that these creatures were fueled by his own deep-seated grudge. The beasts surged forward, a terrifying amalgamation of fangs and claws tearing through the landscape. Stunned by the sheer scale of the threat, the group could only stare in disbelief at the encroaching nightmare. He laughed maniacally, commanding the monsters to unleash their full fury upon the land. As the horizon darkened with the sheer number of incoming threats, they realized the scale of the catastrophe they were facing. She stood her ground, trembling with rage, and demanded to know if he understood the gravity of his actions. She recoiled as Gazuna mocked her, his laughter echoing as the monsters swarmed around them. Wazu, observing the chaos, urged the group to seek higher ground to escape the immediate danger. The horde surged forward, a tide of darkness threatening to consume everything in its path. Gazuna taunted her further, forcing a cruel choice: strike him down and become a killer, or watch everyone perish. She realized with horror that he was right. There seemed to be no way to halt the slaughter without taking his life. He continued to twist the knife, sneering that her kindness toward her own kind was nothing more than a fatal weakness. Suddenly, Wazu appeared amidst the carnage, calm and composed, asking if she was all right. She stared at him in disbelief, stunned by his sudden and inexplicable arrival. The monsters suddenly collapsed, leaving Gazuna reeling in shock as his control over them vanished. He glared at the human, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated rage at the unexpected interference. He stood his ground, dismissing the antagonist's posturing with a blunt remark that he had no interest in conversing with him. Turning his attention to his companion, he urged her to focus solely on the duel, promising to handle the surrounding threats himself. She looked toward the summoner, questioning if the senseless conflict had finally reached its end. The older elf's hand trembled, his knuckles white with a mixture of mounting frustration and suppressed rage. He clutched a glowing red sphere, his expression twisting into a sinister grin as he decided that killing her was the only remaining path. With a dark declaration, he vowed that the very ground they stood upon would become her final resting place. A drop of sweat rolled down his face as he prepared to unleash his hidden malice. Suddenly, a monstrous entity materialized, lunging toward her with a deafening, guttural roar. She braced herself, her eyes widening as she prepared to counter the sudden, violent assault. He watched from the sidelines, his expression hardening as the summoner claimed to be overflowing with power, intent on destroying everyone present. He stood amidst the tension, his sudden display of force leaving the others stunned as they realized he had truly shattered the barrier. Turning his gaze toward the others, he declared that he could no longer stand by and watch the situation unfold in silence. With a sharp, desperate cry, he demanded that no one interfere with his actions. He lunged forward, his expression hardening as he made it clear that he would stop anyone who dared to stand in his way. He barked a command for them to move aside, his focus entirely on the immediate threat before him. He retorted with intense frustration, insisting that the matter had nothing to do with them and demanding to know why they were so concerned. He struck with decisive speed, driven by the singular, fierce conviction that he would never let such a fate befall Serona. As the dust settled, he realized he had shouted his true feelings aloud, leaving him momentarily stunned by his own outburst. He stared ahead, his mind racing as he contemplated the consequences of his impulsive confession. He stood flushed and awkward, unable to meet her eyes as the weight of his words hung heavily in the air between them. He stood frozen as she expressed her gratitude, her eyes glistening with a mix of joy and sorrow as she gently declined his feelings. Struggling to process her rejection, he questioned why his duty as a guardian to protect the village had to stand in the way of his own desires. She stood firm, explaining that her commitment to the village was absolute, leaving no room for a life elsewhere. Watching her struggle with the weight of her decision, he realized that a place like this was never meant to be his final destination. A sudden clarity washed over him. If she could not leave, he would not force her to sacrifice her happiness, for he truly loved her. With a forced smile, he bid her farewell, urging her to stay healthy and promising to continue his own journey to see more of the world. Tears welled in his eyes as he turned away, his voice trembling while he whispered his intent to leave everything behind. He began to run, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the village that had broken his heart. The morning light filters into the room as she leans over him, her face bright with energy as she calls out for him to wake up. He stirs from his slumber, groggily acknowledging her presence while she notes how refreshed she feels after a good night's rest. She continues, her expression animated as she describes the town's excitement over his recent heroics, noting that no one of his caliber has ever appeared in their quiet corner of the world before. He sits up, looking slightly overwhelmed by the praise, while while she playfully shifts the focus to his other accomplishments. He quickly deflects the credit, insisting that she was the one who handled the situation with the sweets entirely on her own. She laughs, teasing him about his humble nature and the sight of the dragon resting on his shoulder, finding the entire scene at the inn to be quite charming. He confirms his plan to head to the guild to have his card reissued, prompting her to remind him of the specific reason for his visit today. She gently nudges him to remember his father, Ragnar, and mentions that the guild master is eagerly anticipating their meeting following yesterday's events. He finds himself interrupted by the arrival of a new face, a young woman named Emma, who introduces herself as an adventurer guild receptionist. She explains that she has been sent to escort him, noting that his recent exploits have made him a topic of conversation. She insists on helping him prepare, urging him to change his clothes quickly as the guild master is eager to meet the man behind the recent rumors. He attempts to protest, insisting he can manage on his own, but she remains undeterred, playfully dismissing his concerns while continuing to assist him. The situation quickly devolves into a clumsy struggle as he trips, his belongings scattering across the floor in a moment of pure embarrassment. Flustered, he recalls the intensity of his recent interactions, his face flushing as he remembers the overwhelming enthusiasm directed toward him. She continues to recount his heroic tales, describing how he vowed to protect those close to him with fierce determination. He listens, visibly overwhelmed by the sudden, intimate nature of the morning's events, feeling completely out of his depth. They finally arrive at the imposing structure of the Adventurers Guild, a grand building that stands as the heart of the city's activity. As they ascend the stairs, she directs him toward the guild master's office on the top floor, while he struggles to keep pace, distracted by the bustling crowd of adventurers and demi-humans. He finds himself breathless and flustered, struggling to maintain his composure as the climb proves more taxing than he anticipated. He stepped into the office, breathless and slightly overwhelmed, as Emma announced their arrival to the figure waiting within. The silhouette turned, revealing himself as the guild master of Linux City, who greeted him with a calm, welcoming demeanor. He introduced himself as Ragnar, his rugged, bald appearance contrasting sharply with the formal setting of the office. The revelation left him stunned, his mind struggling to process the name. As Emma departed, he found himself reeling from the shock, unable to reconcile the man before him with the father of the girl he knew. Ragnar continued, expressing deep gratitude for his role in stopping the Black Blaze's rampage and protecting Lula. He then clarified his family ties, identifying Lula as his daughter and Kayla as his wife, leaving his guest visibly flustered. Unable to contain his disbelief, he blurted out his confusion, questioning how such a rugged man could be related to the girl, while Ragnar remained unfazed. He spiraled into internal panic, struggling to accept that the man who had been so kind was the same person now standing before him as a powerful authority figure. Ragnar observed his distress with a knowing look, acknowledging the harshness of life while offering a moment of reprieve, leaving him feeling small and overwhelmed by the day's revelations. He attempted to deflect the assignment, arguing that others were better suited for the task, but the guild master remained unmoved, insisting that he was the only one capable of handling the situation. Because of his hesitation, the older man pointedly reminded him that his strength was more than sufficient to handle an A-rank party, dismissing his concerns about the others as irrelevant. The young adventurer expressed confusion, questioning why he was being singled out for such a task, only to be told that his unique ability to tame a dragon made him the perfect candidate. The guild master continued, detailing a report from a merchant who had spotted a dragon-like silhouette on a nearby hill 2 weeks prior, providing the justification for the mission. He voiced his concerns about the danger of the creature, but the older man clarified that the objective was reconnaissance, to gather information on the dragon's location, type, and condition rather than immediate subjugation. Seeing his enthusiasm grow, the guild master offered a reward of 30 gold coins, noting with a chuckle that he had never seen anyone so eager to take on such a perilous quest. He accepted the terms with a grin, confident that he could handle the dragon with a single punch if things went south, and requested only a map to guide his journey. As he prepared to depart, he teased the guild master about his bald head, prompting a flustered reaction before being directed to the receptionist to secure the necessary supplies. Meanwhile, the guild master watched him leave, musing to himself that if his daughter trusted the young man's strength, then perhaps the mission was not as impossible as it seemed. With the map finally in hand, he turned his attention toward the road ahead, already planning to stock up on water and rations for the trek. He found himself surrounded by a crowd of admirers, all buzzing with excitement over his recent exploits as a dragon tamer. Amidst the chatter, a woman approached, surprised to learn that the guild master was his spouse. She offered him water and sandwiches, mentioning that Lula had already briefed her on the situation, much to his amusement. He accepted the gesture, though he couldn't help but feel a twinge of frustration upon learning that Kayla-san was already occupied with someone else. Suddenly, the lighthearted atmosphere shattered as he realized Tata had vanished into the crowd, leaving him in a state of frantic concern. Spotting her nearby, he urged her to follow him, sensing they were being pursued and needed to find cover immediately. They ducked into the shadows, holding their breath as the tension of the chase weighed heavily upon them. Outside their hiding spot, their pursuers grumbled about the missed opportunity, though they remained confident that she would return by sunset. Huddled in the dark, he felt a deep sense of unease, convinced that the individuals outside were harboring malicious intent. As the situation calmed, he introduced himself to a mysterious figure, who recognized him as the adventurer who had defeated the dragon. The stranger leaned in, a knowing smile playing on their lips as they acknowledged his name with a sense of intrigue. He gazed at her, his mind lingering on the simple, gentle name she had just spoken, Tata. She laughed off his concern about her light equipment, insisting that he must be quite strong to handle a dragon-slaying quest with such ease. He brushed off the need for repayment, though he accepted her gratitude with a modest nod. She then inquired about his own troubles, urging him to remain cautious of those who might wish him harm until they could meet again. Flustered, she questioned why he would go to such lengths for a mere stranger like her. He looked at her with a soft, knowing gaze, admitting that he simply could not leave someone with such a lonely expression to face the world alone. With that, she turned and began to walk away, promising to return to the city as soon as possible. He watched her go, offering a final, warm farewell as she departed. Left behind in the bustling streets, she mused on his character, finding him to be a truly strange and kind person. Nearby, a pair of observers spotted him, their eyes narrowing as they recognized the traveler. He stood at the city gate, encountering the guard who had previously issued his temporary pass. The man recognized him, confirming his destination was indeed the dragon-slaying quest. As he turned to leave, the guard shouted a final warning, urging him to reconsider and form a party before facing such a dangerous beast alone. The guard watched him depart with a heavy heart, silently hoping the young adventurer would somehow survive the encounter. He traveled across the vast, open landscape, noting the significant distance he still had to cover to reach his objective. Consulting the map provided by Ragnar, he identified the specific hill located near a large lake in the eastern forest as his target. With a sudden burst of movement, he demonstrated his ability to store and retrieve items, causing his companion to vanish and reappear in an instant. His companion marveled at the convenience of this storage magic, realizing how much easier their journey would be without the burden of heavy supplies. He affectionately teased her about her future prospects, while she expressed her delight at the newfound utility of his unique power. Surveying the expansive horizon, he felt the weight of the world scale, contemplating the search for a companion who would remain by his side forever. Finally arriving at the designated hill, he scanned the area for any sign of the dragon, only to find a mysterious cave entrance instead. He stood at the threshold of the dark cavern, calling out into the silence, but his search for the dragon yielded nothing but empty shadows. Suddenly, a fierce, snarling creature lunged from the darkness, and as he recoiled in shock, he realized with a start that the beast was none other than Mir's mother. The young adventurer finds himself in a tense standoff with the monstrous creature, struggling to recall her name as she looms over him in a fit of rage. She bellows in frustration, clarifying that she is not a mere beast to be fought, but a wife who has returned to her birthplace after leaving her husband behind. Confused by this revelation, he admits he only arrived to investigate rumors of a dragon, never suspecting the creature was actually the woman known as Melsan. As the tension dissipates, he realizes that if he can resolve this misunderstanding, he can report back to the guildmaster that the threat was never a violent dragon at all. She begins to calm down, expressing embarrassment over her earlier outburst while confirming that the mountain is indeed her home. The conversation shifts to her husband, Ragnar, as she explains that he had been busy with household chores when she last saw him. He is left reeling in shock, unable to process the absurdity of the situation as she reveals that her husband had cheated on her with a dragon. Stunned, he questions how such a thing could happen, especially considering the beauty of his companion and the fact that she has a daughter with him. He listened intently as the dragon explained that reconciliation with her husband seemed impossible without an apology, noting that she had returned to her birthplace to consult her mother. The adventurer questioned the lack of concrete evidence regarding the alleged infidelity, pointing out the potential for a massive misunderstanding between her and her spouse. He proposed a solution. He would bring her husband, Ragnar, to this location so they could discuss the matter properly, offering to act as a witness to ensure her comfort. She reacted with visible relief, admitting that despite her hesitation, she truly desired to reconcile with him. With the plan set, he instructed her to remain at the mountain retreat and relax while he departed to fetch her husband. As he traveled, he reflected on the situation, musing that her husband could learn a thing or two from her kindness, as she was clearly someone who would never abandon another in need. The journey took him across vast, rugged landscapes until the destination finally came into view. He arrived at the castle and called out for Ragnar, announcing his presence. Upon entering, he encountered a massive, armored creature resting within the hall. He approached the beast, questioning why it was alone and where Mir had gone, only to realize the creature was indeed Mir, who seemed deeply troubled by her mother's marital strife. He stood before the massive dragon, demanding to know where she was, only to be met with a frantic, defensive denial of any infidelity. The dragon scoffed at the suggestion, questioning why a creature of his stature should ever have to offer an apology. He pressed the issue, pointing out that the dragon's companion, Karel, was clearly more than just a casual acquaintance, despite the dragon's insistence that it was a private matter. The dragon admitted that Karel was indeed beautiful and popular among his kind, having invited him to dine on several occasions. He listened as the dragon recounted how Melsan had witnessed these advances and fled in a fit of rage, despite his claims of innocence. Frustrated by the dragon's arrogance, he urged him to set aside his pride and acknowledge that his behavior was hurtful, regardless of his intentions. He explained that Melsan's anger was justified, as the dragon had clearly enjoyed the attention he received from Karel. The dragon pondered the consequences, realizing that his actions had likely pushed his partner to a point of no return. He offered a path to reconciliation, suggesting that a sincere apology and a promise to reject future advances would mend the rift. Exhausted from his efforts, he secured the dragon's agreement to make amends, while also arranging a place to rest after his long journey. He deflects the teasing about his lack of a romantic life, choosing to keep his focus on the task at hand rather than his own solitude. The dragon continues to press him, suggesting that if he were a dragon himself, he would surely be popular with the ladies, though the comment only leaves him feeling bitter. Suddenly, the dragon takes flight with Ragnar, leaving him to wonder what exactly is happening as they soar into the sky. Moments later, the dragon returns with Melsan, announcing her arrival as he watches the reunion unfold. The atmosphere shifts instantly as the mother of Mir appears, her presence causing a stir as she confronts the situation with a sharp, aggressive demeanor. He attempts to mediate, explaining that the entire conflict is a misunderstanding, though the mother remains skeptical of his involvement. The mother turns her attention toward him, acknowledging that she has heard much about him from her daughter, Mel. He stands there, momentarily caught off guard by the sudden shift in the conversation and the weight of her gaze. She introduces herself as the former Dragon Queen, revealing her true identity and her intentions regarding her daughter's future. Realizing he has stepped into a metaphorical minefield, he internally resolves to fix the situation and ensure the couple reconciles, regardless of the personal cost. He listens as the conversation turns to his own intentions, with the others noting how happy he appeared when he first suggested bringing his partner to apologize. Caught in the middle, he wonders why he was dragged into this, especially since his attempt to facilitate an apology resulted in nothing but the repetition of his own name. Frustrated by the circular bickering, he finally snaps, demanding that they stop the games and simply reconcile already. The dragon retorts with sharp advice, warning him that from now on, he must learn to navigate the whims of women, as his pride has already been left in tatters. He watches as the discussion shifts to the habits of human males, with the others noting that taking a partner to a fine restaurant is a classic, albeit often ineffective, move. Questioning the logic of such gestures, he asks if there are even any high-class restaurants suitable for dragons, only to be met with the reality that such places are non-existent. The conversation continues as he realizes the logistical impossibility of bringing a massive dragon into a human town for a meal. As the talk concludes, he stands before the dragon, acknowledging the weight of the situation and the complex family dynamics at play. He offers a sincere apology for the trouble he has caused, seeking to clear the air before moving forward. Determined to regain control, he resolves to create distance between himself and the female dragon, deciding to refuse any further contact to avoid future complications. He proposed a journey to the human town of Lynn, expressing a desire to deepen their bond and offering an invitation to a special place as a gesture of reconciliation. The dragon mother was visibly moved by his thoughtfulness, envisioning a peaceful retreat where they could soothe their hearts and enjoy the local scenery. She agreed that a rest was long overdue, noting that it had been quite some time since she and Mir had visited the human settlement. The dragon mother then sternly reminded him that his previous actions were foolish, warning him never to forget the weight of her feelings. He acknowledged her point with a nervous laugh, though he quickly pivoted to the practical concern of how they intended to enter the town given their massive, draconic forms. She dismissed his concern with surprise, explaining that their immense mana reserves allowed them to take on human appearances without any difficulty. As he confirmed this realization, a blinding flash of light erupted, signaling their transformation into human forms. The light faded to reveal two stunningly attractive human figures, leaving him momentarily stunned as they prepared to depart for Lynn. The elf woman sat alone on a rocky outcrop, sighing as she reflected on the 10 days that had passed since she left her village in pursuit of the man she sought. She gazed toward the distant harbor, wondering if he had already boarded a ship to some far-off land. Her thoughts spiraled into uncertainty. He might have moved to another continent entirely, or perhaps he was hiding in a nearby city, leaving her with no clear path to find him. She recalled their shared promise to face adventures and daily life together, a memory that fueled her resolve to continue the journey. The memory of his face remained vivid, a constant reminder of the bond they had forged. Suddenly, a wave of anxiety washed over her as she imagined him already surrounded by new companions, or perhaps even a new harem, causing her to break down in distress. She stood silhouetted against the horizon, questioning if she still held a rightful place by his side or within his heart. Her internal monologue was interrupted by a greeting from Lula, forcing her to confront the painful reality that she had already been rejected and that joining his group seemed like a distant, impossible dream. Despite her inner turmoil, she managed to maintain a polite facade, accepting a batch of goods from Lula as the day continued. She continued her conversation, discussing the quality of the bread and the baker who prepared it, noting that it remained delicious even when cold. As the conversation concluded, she bid her companion farewell, reminding him to be careful on his journey. He hesitated, clearly flustered by her offer to share the food, struggling to find the right words as he accepted the gesture. Overcome by hunger, she insisted that he take a bite, her eyes sparkling with genuine delight as she praised the quality of the bread. The conversation shifted as she inquired about the location of the inn, learning it was situated in the nearby town of Lynn. She introduced herself as Serona, and upon hearing the name of the inn, she decided it would be a suitable place to stay. The two women stood by the roadside, exchanging names and pleasantries as they prepared to part ways. Lula expressed her surprise at meeting an elf, noting that such encounters were rare in their village, while Serona explained her search for a specific man. She asked for information about the man she was tracking, hoping that a visit to the inn in Lynn might yield some clues. As she contemplated the journey, her thoughts drifted to the man himself, a kind, strong, and somewhat aloof figure who inspired a protective instinct within her. She finds herself blushing deeply, admitting that while she was hoping for a description of his character, the realization of his cuteness, even as a man, has caught her off guard. Recovering her composure, she describes him as a tall young man, often seen with a small dragon perched on his head and dressed in a worn black robe. The conversation shifts as they confirm the dragon's name is Mir, and she learns that he is currently staying at their inn. Overwhelmed by the sudden news, she collapses in a heap, stunned by the miraculous turn of events. She questions the effort taken to reach this place, learning that the journey was made entirely on foot, not by magic. Her companion teases her about her obvious affection for him, causing her to flush with embarrassment. She attempts to deny the accusation, insisting that she is not ready to join his harem, despite her clear feelings. A flicker of insecurity crosses her face as she wonders if he has already moved on or found a new partner. Her friend laughs at her transparency, noting that he is still traveling alone, though she playfully excludes the dragon from that count. As they look out toward the inn, she feels a wave of nervous anticipation, wondering if he will truly accept her when he returns. She stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs as the reality of their journey together finally sank in. As they continued, her companion pointed toward a distant group, noting that their destination was just a little further ahead. Her breath hitched when she finally caught sight of him. The familiar face she had been longing to see was right there. Confusion clouded her expression as she realized he was not alone, surrounded by unfamiliar faces that sparked a sudden, sharp pang of uncertainty. The group surrounding him appeared composed and confident, their presence casting a shadow over her own expectations. Watching him interact with these new companions, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of distance. She tried to rationalize the sight, telling herself that his kind and reliable nature would naturally draw others to him, yet the ache remained. Her companion urged her forward, insisting that she approach him now that they had finally found him. Suddenly, the companion hesitated, admitting she had other matters to attend to and asking if she would deliver his guild card instead. Left with the task, she took the card, watching as her companion departed, leaving her to face the reunion alone. She stood frozen, bewildered by her own sudden flight, unable to comprehend why she had bolted when she had been so eager for this encounter. Her boots crunched against the forest floor as she retreated, each heavy step echoing the frantic rhythm of her heart. Breathless and leaning against a tree, she berated herself for running away, questioning why she couldn't simply call out to him as she had intended. The plan had been so straightforward: approach him, offer an apology, and ask to join his group. Yet the reality of the situation had paralyzed her. Tears welled in her eyes as she agonized over her own behavior, wondering why she had acted so coldly toward him. She stared into the distance, haunted by the memory of her own harshness and the regret of pushing him away. A bittersweet smile touched her lips as she recalled his expression, a mix of frustration and loneliness that mirrored her own internal state. Standing alone in the quiet woods, she began to question the nature of the emotions that had suddenly taken root within her. A sudden, profound realization washed over her, clarifying the true source of her turmoil. She finally understood that long before she had even acknowledged it, she had already fallen for him. She stands before the imposing silhouette of the guild hall, her heart heavy with the weight of her recent realization. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with disbelief as Wazu confronts the absurdity of the situation, questioning how he is expected to accept that the Dragon King and his family are sitting right before him. A sudden, thunderous impact shakes the room, drawing everyone's startled attention toward the source of the commotion. The beast, now fully revealed, demands that the transformation be undone, and Wazu, eager to conclude his mission, pleads for it to return to its human form immediately. With the tension momentarily diffused, Wazu turns his attention to Ragnar, inquiring about local dining options while reminding him of the promised rewards and the new guild card. Ragnar agrees to handle the arrangements, suggesting they stay at the Breeze of Light Inn, while Wazu encourages Ragnar to give his best effort in their upcoming endeavors. The conversation shifts as they mention a girl named Lula, who had entrusted them with delivering a guild card to Wazu. He accepts the card, his expression thoughtful as he contemplates the unexpected arrival of this new item. Meanwhile, in the quiet outskirts, she wanders through the landscape, wondering if he has finally arrived. The group finds themselves amidst the vibrant bustle of a human town, marveling at the sheer variety of sights and shops that surround them. They discuss their plans for the evening, noting that the Dragon King has already secured reservations at a premier dining establishment. As they wander, they stumble upon a shooting range, where the mother figure of the group demonstrates her surprising marksmanship, drawing cheers from her companions. Encouraged by the success, she insists that Mel try her hand at the challenge, though the younger woman approaches the weapon with visible trepidation. The attempt proves disastrous. Mel misses every target, her frustration mounting as the shopkeeper watches on with a sympathetic, albeit awkward, expression. To soften the blow of her failure, the shopkeeper offers her a small consolation prize, while the group notes the lively, crowded nature of the entertainment district. The conversation shifts to the local gossip, as they recall the scandalous history of the Dragon King and his past infidelities, which had deeply angered the proprietress and her mother. Their attention is drawn to a grand, imposing building nearby, prompting questions about its purpose, though they quickly decide to move on to their next destination. The structure in question is revealed to be the town's most prestigious brothel, standing as a silent testament to the city's darker indulgences. Elsewhere, Ragnar meticulously plans a shopping excursion, determined to select the finest attire for their guests, while reminding his subordinates of the delicate nature of their current human forms. He prepares to depart, but his companions quickly interject, urging him not to abandon them in the middle of the town. They shift the conversation to his guild card, reminding him that he needs to re-register it, and suggesting they meet at the guild tomorrow. As the discussion continues, he finds himself reflecting on Salona's unexpected efforts to return his lost card to him. He muses on her apparent disdain for him, wondering if she truly harbors such deep resentment. The mood lightens as his companions tease him, their playful banter masking the underlying tension of their situation. They press him for details about his time away, specifically asking if he formed any new alliances while separated from the group. He dismisses the inquiry with a wave, realizing that Salona had likely misinterpreted his intentions all along. Observing the surroundings, he notes that even a place as lively as this town has its share of unsavory characters. The focus shifts to a hearty meal, where he and his companions enjoy the local cuisine with genuine enthusiasm. Nearby, others at the table share in the feast, their laughter and satisfaction highlighting a rare moment of peace. He stood amidst the group, feeling the weight of the bill as he awkwardly accepted their gratitude for settling the tab. Reflecting on the recent tension, he admitted to himself that his impulsive reaction toward the dragon had been misguided, acknowledging that he had allowed his emotions to cloud his judgment. The air cleared between them as they exchanged heartfelt apologies and declarations of affection, effectively putting the misunderstanding behind them. His relief was short-lived, however, as he erupted in frustration upon discovering that the expected 30 gold coins had dwindled to a mere 5. The realization hit him hard. The guild master had deducted the costs for the Dragon King's feast and their lodging, leaving them with almost nothing. Despite the financial setback, he was encouraged to take on more high-reward quests, learning that his guild rank had been promoted from F to C in one fell swoop. She explained that while his strength made the promotion a formality, he would still need to undergo a test to officially solidify his new stand. He listened intently as she confirmed that his guild card had been safely recovered, urging him to focus on his upcoming tasks. A new development caught his attention. The guild master had arranged for him to visit a nice place that evening as a gesture of gratitude. He looked on with a mix of confusion and suspicion as the implications of the invitation became clear, leaving him to wonder what kind of evening awaited him. He returns home to find Mir waiting, who casually welcomes him back and reminds him that she is his live-in bodyguard. She explains that Ragnar has entrusted Mir to him, even going so far as to rent the room next to his. Confused by this development, he questions why he is being charged for the lodging fee if the arrangement was meant to be a favor, only to realize the misunderstanding regarding the inn services. Mir attempts to soothe his frustration, noting that humans are greedy, while Q chimes in to defend his loyalty, insisting he would never cheat on his loved ones. With the situation settled, he bids Mir to stay behind and be a good girl while he departs. He finds himself in a carriage with Ragnar, questioning why they are heading toward the entertainment district. Ragnar explains that as a reward for his successful investigation, he is being treated to a night out, highlighting the various attractions available in the area. The conversation takes an unexpected turn when Ragnar suggests introducing him to a girl or two for the night. He vehemently protests, insisting he only wants to visit the facility's owner, a former comrade, and demanding to be left out of any illicit activities. Ragnar dismisses his concerns, reminding him that he is legally an adult now that he has turned 15, and implies that he has likely already experienced such services before. He stood there, visibly flustered and overwhelmed, as his companion pressed him on his lack of experience with such establishments. The man, Ragnar, laughed off his discomfort, casually announcing his arrival to the establishment's proprietor. The proprietor, a sharp-featured man in a tuxedo, stepped forward to greet them with a welcoming, albeit imposing, presence. He introduced himself as Garrett, the owner, and immediately began praising the young adventurer's reputation, noting his legendary status as a survivor of dragon encounters. Garrett then ushered them inside, remarking on the young man's visible restlessness and promising a special seat for his old friend. Once seated, the conversation turned toward the establishment's offerings, with Ragnar teasingly suggesting that he was free to choose any companion he desired. He stammered in protest, clearly out of his depth, while the surrounding women giggled at his youthful, bashful reaction. Ragnar continued to push, questioning whether his hesitation stemmed from a lack of interest in women or a deeper, hidden insecurity. Suddenly, a striking woman approached their table, declaring herself the most beautiful flower in the house and offering to accompany him for the evening. He looked up in shock, recognizing her instantly as the same woman he had encountered previously. He listened as Tata explained that she and the young man had crossed paths before, specifically when he had come to her aid during a shopping trip. She continued, her tone shifting as she hinted that their relationship had since evolved into something far more intimate. Flustered, he stammered a frantic denial, his face flushing crimson as he questioned whether he was truly worthy of such a claim. The tension was broken when he suddenly downed a glass of strong liquor, only to immediately choke as the harsh spirit burned his throat. Observing his struggle, the others remarked on his poor tolerance for alcohol, while the host noted that connecting him with a companion would be a wise gesture during his stay. Overcome by the potent drink, he collapsed onto the floor, his consciousness slipping away as the room spun around him. Waking in a daze, he felt a soft, unfamiliar sensation against his head and looked up to find Tata watching over him with a gentle expression. She smiled warmly, reassuring him that he had simply fainted from the alcohol and that there was no need for him to be so distressed. As he sat up, she explained that they were currently in her private room within the mansion, offering him water to soothe his parched throat. He learned that Ragnar had already departed, having entrusted her with the task of looking after him while he recovered. He sat up, still feeling the haze of his intoxication, and offered a sheepish apology for the trouble he had caused. With a gentle laugh, she dismissed his concerns, assuring him that she was well accustomed to caring for those who had overindulged. As he turned his gaze toward her, the sight of her disrobing left him completely stunned, his face flushing with sudden, overwhelming shock. Panic surged through him as he stammered, begging her to stop, but she only leaned in closer, calmly explaining that she was merely preparing to get intimate so they could become better acquainted. Overwhelmed by the proximity and her bold invitation, he could only clutch his chest, his heart racing as he realized he was entirely unprepared for such a development. Wazu finds himself in a state of panic as Tata suddenly initiates an intimate encounter, leaving him stammering in disbelief. He attempts to protest the rapid escalation of their situation, but she dismisses his concerns, insisting that sharing a bed is simply a way to get to know one another better. She gently brushes off his awkwardness, clarifying that her intentions are not what he fears, but rather a genuine desire for connection. Flustered, he scolds her for being so careless with her own body, urging her to value herself more highly. The tension breaks as she lets out a soft, amused laugh, finding his earnest concern both unexpected and endearing. She gazes at him with newfound warmth, remarking on how strange yet kind he truly is, which only deepens his embarrassment. A moment of reflection follows as she admits feeling guilty for attempting to deceive someone as honest as him. She reveals the truth. She had been asking Ragnar to introduce them because she had heard of his prowess in defeating 3 adventurers at the Light Inn. With a somber expression, she asks if he would be willing to lend her his strength. He realizes the gravity of her request, wondering if her troubles are connected to the people who were pursuing him previously. He listened as she nervously questioned if he truly required no reward for his assistance, her voice trailing off in uncertainty. Because of her hesitation, he quickly reassured her that he had no need for money, dismissing the idea that he was looking for repayment. With a gentle smile, he looked at her, his expression softening as he acknowledged her current state. She reacted with a playful pout, her cheeks flushing as she processed his directness. The young woman looked away, visibly embarrassed, admitting that his intense gaze made her feel as though he could see right through her. He accepted her request with pleasure, though he insisted that she share her own story with him in return. She began to explain the gravity of her situation, detailing how forceful individuals had attempted to kidnap her, forcing her to work to pay off her father's debts. As she spoke, he listened intently, realizing that her parents were suffering to support her, which had driven her to seek his help in desperation. He declared his intention to confront the creditor directly, confident that this would allow her to return to her parents. She immediately panicked, begging him not to fight the man, warning that no matter how powerful he was, the danger was too great. She continued to plead, her voice trembling as she explained that Wazu's intervention would only bring him trouble and force her to flee the city entirely. Despite her fears, she remained resolute, declaring her intent to pay off her father's debt through her own hard work, even if her creditors made it nearly impossible. Her eyes welled with emotion as she looked at him, whispering a single, desperate request for him to protect her. He offered a warm, reassuring smile, promising that he would come to her aid the moment she called, no matter the circumstances. Seeing the unwavering determination in his gaze, she felt a surge of hope, acknowledging that she would support his resolve. He affirmed his commitment, pledging to give everything he had to help her. Overcome with gratitude, she gazed at him with a soft, flushed expression, thanking him deeply for his kindness. The conversation shifted as she curiously asked about his motivations for becoming an adventurer, playfully suggesting that he might be building a harem. She then boldly offered to be the first member of that hypothetical group, watching his reaction with a knowing smile. Flustered by her forwardness, he stammered a denial, only for her to reaffirm her belief in his inherent kindness. He pondered their next move, noting the hourglass and the abundance of time they still possessed. She giggled, admitting she was new to the city of Lynn and eager for his recommendations on local sites and dining. He readily agreed to show her around, their conversation flowing easily as they sat together. As morning light broke and birds began to chirp, the sun rose over the quiet estate. She awoke with a start, glancing around the room in confusion as the realization of the passing night hit her. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she processed the situation, her eyes widening in sudden, intense embarrassment. She sat there, clutching her chest, stunned by the fact that he had refrained from taking advantage of her while she slept. Covering her face with her hands, she struggled to contain the overwhelming surge of emotion. He remained fast asleep nearby, oblivious to her internal turmoil as she stole a glance at him. He suddenly stirred, his voice firm as he scolded her for not valuing her own body, leaving her completely overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She stood amidst the morning light, her thoughts swirling with a profound sense of worthlessness as she contemplated the events that had transpired. The silence was abruptly shattered by a loud, unrestrained yawn that echoed through the room. He blinked, shaking off the remnants of sleep, only to find a business card left behind by his companion, leaving him to wonder where she had vanished to. A satisfied grin spread across his face as he recalled their time together, already looking forward to their next encounter. His peaceful reflection was cut short when a sharp-tongued newcomer confronted him, aggressively warning him not to let his ego inflate just because he had spent a night with her superior. He could only offer a sheepish, knowing smile in response to her hostility, silently acknowledging the truth of her accusations. The beastkin scoffed at his reaction, dismissing the business card as mere lip service and insisting that she would never allow such a casual connection to happen again. She continued her tirade, questioning his audacity and expecting her to divulge personal details to a complete stranger who had suddenly inserted himself into their affairs. With a dismissive wave, she shooed him away, her posture radiating pure disdain as she demanded he leave immediately. Watching him retreat, she narrowed her eyes, harboring deep-seated doubts about his true capabilities despite the high praise he had received from others. She, the agile beastkin, leaps across the rooftops, her mind fixated on the singular duty of protecting her charge from those she deems dangerous. Below, she attempts to soothe the small, dragon-like creature, who is sulking and scratching at the ground in a fit of jealousy. The creature continues to fuss, prompting her to clarify that she did not return home last night, nor did she engage in anything suspicious. Their conversation is interrupted by a chance encounter with Tata, who greets them warmly and offers to treat them to a meal as an apology for their previous meeting. She introduces her companion, Mir, to Tata, identifying the young woman as her bodyguard. The introduction is met with a sharp slap to the back, as Mir expresses her frustration at being labeled a bodyguard, feeling clearly disliked by the beastkin. Ignoring the tension, she asks Tata if she might play with the small dragon for a while, offering to carry the creature's belongings in the meantime. The beastkin abruptly commands Wazu to be a man and sees the opportunity to get closer to Tata, leaving him bewildered as she drags the others away. Watching them depart, Wazu realizes that the beastkin is intentionally creating space for him to be alone with Tata. With a chuckle, he accepts the situation, and they begin to discuss their plans to shop for cosmetics and accessories for the other women in the mansion. He walked alongside Tata as she explained her choice of a smaller jewelry shop, noting that the kindness of the people there made it a place she wanted to support. Upon entering, they were greeted by the shopkeeper, who mentioned that they occasionally stocked unique, one-of-a-kind items. While she browsed the selection with genuine interest, he stood by, observing the quiet atmosphere of the store. Moments later, he stepped outside to wait, his silhouette framed against the bright street as he kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. He called out to Tata, urging her to stay inside and avoid stepping out into the street, though his sudden concern left her momentarily confused. The street grew tense as he stood his ground, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. A group of men confronted him, mocking his presence and boasting that they would easily take Tata now that her beastkin protector was absent. Before they could finish their taunts, he lunged forward with blinding speed, striking them down with precise, heavy blows that left them reeling in shock. He sighed in frustration at the nuisance, only to be interrupted by a voice from the shadows noting his surprising strength. He turned to find Ninya standing before him, her expression one of calm recognition as she acknowledged his hidden power. She continued, noting that Mir had spoken of his hidden strength, a fact that clearly surprised him. He acknowledged the observation, realizing that her confrontation with the thugs had been a calculated test to see if he was capable of protecting her sister. She admitted that while she had intended to intervene if things turned dangerous, his swift victory rendered her help unnecessary. When he pressed for the truth, she stood firm, questioning if he was truly ready to hear the gravity of the situation. She explained that the entire ordeal stemmed from a debt involving her sister, a burden that had forced her into a desperate position. Her expression twisted into one of pure fury as she revealed that the debt itself was a complete fabrication, a cruel lie manufactured by the city's lord. She recounted how the lord had used her sister as collateral to extort her family, leaving him stunned and horrified by the depth of the corruption. In the quiet of the town, she calls out to him, her voice filled with a mix of relief and longing as she finally catches sight of him. She scolds him for wandering off, reminding him that his duty is to act as her bodyguard, not to disappear on his own. Because of her frustration, she grows flustered, her face flushing as she realizes the intensity of her own reaction to his absence. He steps forward, his expression firm and reassuring, telling her that she no longer needs to carry the weight of her worries alone now that he is by her side. Overwhelmed by his sudden declaration, she can only offer a soft, hesitant response, deeply moved by his promise. She thanks him, her heart fluttering at the passion behind his words, while he remains focused on her well-being. He reflects on the information shared by Ninya, feeling the weight of the truth settling in his heart. The reality of her situation is far more complex than it seemed. She is not merely in debt, but a target of the city's powerful lord. It is revealed that the debt is a fabrication, a trap set by the lord to claim her, though she has found allies in Reagan and Galette who are working to expose the deception. He realizes the urgency of the situation. The lord is closing in, and the truth must be brought to light before it is too late. He stood amidst the market stalls, his resolve hardened by the injustice Tata faced. With a fierce declaration, he vowed to confront the lord who had fabricated her debt, his anger palpable as he promised to settle the score. A merchant interrupted his grim thoughts, assuming the pair was shopping for matching trinkets, a suggestion that caught them both off guard. She flushed deeply, her voice trembling as she stammered in embarrassment, clearly flustered by the implication of being seen as a couple. Seeking to hide her reddening face, she clung to his arm, whispering softly about whether this simple gesture might make her appear like a normal girl. He looked at her with genuine confusion, his brow furrowing as he questioned why she would doubt her own normalcy. With a warm, disarming smile, he insisted she was far more beautiful than any ordinary girl, causing her to stumble over her words in a frantic, blushing attempt to clarify her meaning. The intensity of his compliment left her breathless, her eyes softening as the weight of his words settled between them. As the day faded into night, the two found themselves in the quiet intimacy of their shared quarters. She gazed at him, her expression shifting from shy hesitation to a quiet, profound vulnerability. In the stillness of the room, the boundaries between them dissolved, leaving only the raw, unspoken connection they had forged. She stood frozen, her breath catching as a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion washed over her. It was a sensation she thought long buried, a dormant part of her spirit that had withered during her darkest days. In that fleeting moment, her gaze fell upon a pair of rings resting before them, their simple beauty cutting through the silence. He watched her reaction, his voice soft as he remarked on their beauty, drawing her closer into the shared intimacy of the discovery. The atmosphere shifted as they browsed the shop, their focus turning to the selection of items, with him thoughtfully considering a gift for Mir as well. He examined the rings closely, deciphering the ancient script engraved upon them. The man's band bore the promise, "I hold you dear." She looked up at him, her eyes wide as he revealed the inscription on the women's ring. "I look only at you." The weight of those words hung in the air, a silent vow that mirrored the deepest, most secret wish of her heart. A shadow of doubt flickered across her expression, as she questioned whether someone as tainted as she could truly be worthy of such a wish. He stood firm in his conviction, his belief in her unwavering, causing her heart to race with a newfound, fragile hope. She stood before him, face flushed with embarrassment as she held out the ring, stammering a request for him to accept it. He reached out, and together they stood bathed in the soft, ethereal light filtering through the window, a quiet moment of shared intimacy. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a sensation so foreign and overwhelming that she couldn't help but wonder if this was what it truly felt like to be in love. She quickly clarified that the gift held no deeper meaning, insisting it was merely a token of gratitude for his protection, though her nervous demeanor betrayed her true feelings. He accepted the condition, agreeing to wear the ring only when they were reunited, a promise that seemed to ease her internal turmoil. She vowed to wear it herself, determined not to let the trinket become a burden that might hinder his combat prowess. A soft smile graced her lips as she whispered her agreement, sealing the pact between them with a quiet, heartfelt promise. The weight of her own boldness suddenly crashed down upon her, leaving her feeling deeply ashamed of her impulsive behavior. As the group prepared to part ways, he offered a reassuring farewell, entrusting her with the task of escorting him to the mansion, while she remained lost in her own thoughts. He bid her a final goodbye, leaving her to gaze at the ring on her finger, while a nearby observer watched her with a knowing, suspicious glint in her eyes. She stammered, desperately trying to deflect the accusation, insisting she hadn't implied anything while Wazu looked on, clearly flustered by the sudden scrutiny. The tension was abruptly broken as Mir, overcome with frustration, began to chomp down on Wazu's hand, her small creature-like form vibrating with agitation. He pleaded with her to stop, warning that her tantrum threatened to bring the entire inn down around them. The confrontation escalated as he berated Wazu for exchanging rings with Tata, declaring that even if Mir hadn't been angry, he would have struck him for such a slight against his daughter. He continued his tirade, calling his son-in-law an idiot and warning him that his role as Mir's bodyguard made their proximity dangerous. She interjected with a soft thank you to Megal, suggesting they simply choose to believe Wazu's account of events to keep the peace. He then turned his attention to Mir, offering her a souvenir and warning her that he would use the full power of the dragons to punish anyone who threatened her, regardless of their strength. Wazu, meanwhile, offered a heartfelt apology to Mir, acknowledging that despite all her help, he had never truly repaid her kindness. The gift shimmered with an ethereal light, a symbol of a love that transcended the current turmoil. As she wept with joy, he realized with a start that she had never shown such emotion over his gifts before, leaving him stunned as he pulled her into a tight embrace. He remains haunted by the memory of Mir's bold declaration, her voice echoing in his mind as she insisted on sleeping by his side. Waking with a groan, he finds his body aching, his thoughts immediately turning to Mir as he struggles to shake off the lingering fatigue. As he attempts to rise, he realizes he is not alone. Mir is already up, moving about the room with a restless energy that catches him off guard. She confronts him with a mix of embarrassment and frustration, forcing him to choose between social ruin or accepting a series of unreasonable tasks. The conversation shifts to the pressing matter at hand, the emergence of a dangerous poison swamp. They discuss the gravity of the situation, noting that while no casualties have been reported yet, the toxic spread near the forest of Lynn threatens the safety of all adventurers. He reveals his unique advantage, demonstrating that his status allows him to nullify the effects of the poison entirely, much to her astonishment. With the danger neutralized by his presence, she begrudgingly entrusts him with the scouting mission, though she cannot help but comment on his monstrous resilience. He acknowledges the severity of the toxins, confirming that the environment is far too hazardous for Mir to accompany him. Before departing, he gently urges her to remain safe and wait for his return, leaving her behind as he prepares to face the encroaching gloom. He reassured his companions that he would return quickly, though they remained deeply concerned about the sudden appearance of the poison swamp. Sensing his unease, he insisted that they bring him along, trusting his instincts that something was wrong. He acknowledged his own strength, but reminded him that it was perfectly acceptable to rely on others when the situation demanded it. With a dismissive wave, he transformed into a dragon, offering to fly him to the forest instantly, despite the others' protests about his appearance. They took to the skies, leaving the others behind as the massive wings beat against the air. Meanwhile, she and her mother sensed a dark presence, noting that the unnatural clouding of the air was far from a simple phenomenon. A small creature whimpered, sensing an approaching evil that made its old scars ache with a familiar, painful intensity. He stood amidst the group, his presence radiating a confidence that irritated those who viewed him as nothing more than a low-ranked nuisance. Whispers circulated about the legendary Red Orb and the rumors of a man who had somehow tamed the Dragon King without losing his sanity. A mysterious figure emerged from the shadows, mocking the group's ignorance while revealing that the orb's power was only growing stronger. The mysterious merchant stands before the group, casually revealing that he possesses the legendary Red Orb. His nonchalant claim that he is merely a merchant leaves the adventurers stunned, questioning if he is truly the rumored invincible adventurer who wields such power. He brushes off their inquiries with a sharp retort, telling them to mind their own business. Despite his cold demeanor, he offers them a discount, claiming he simply feels pity for their situation in the city. As they hesitantly accept the offer, he produces the dark, pulsating orb. He promises that the artifact holds enough strength to grant them the power necessary to defeat even the Dragon King. With the transaction complete, he shifts his focus, asking if they know the location of the local lord's mansion. A sinister grin spreads across his face as he prepares to set his next plan into motion. The adventurer gazes out over the blighted landscape, his senses overwhelmed by the foul, pervasive stench of corruption emanating from the forest. He considers the toxic purple miasma, noting that while a burst of fire might clear the immediate area, it would do little to solve the underlying blight, prompting him to suggest heading toward the forest's entrance. His companion questions their long-term strategy, pointing out the lack of magic and the uncertainty of their destination, but he remains focused on simply locating the source of the corruption. Observing his calm demeanor, she wonders aloud about the source of his unwavering confidence, even as the weight of their grim situation presses down on them. Deciding it is the perfect moment, he shifts into his human form, inviting his companion to observe the true extent of his strength. As they continue, she admits the miasma is becoming uncomfortable, yet he notes with surprise that he perceives the scent as fresh citrus, a testament to his unusual adaptability. He reflects on his survival, noting that his body began changing after Mir saved him from the brink of death, though he remains uncertain if it was divine intervention or the mysterious food he consumed. When pressed about his desires during that near-death experience, he struggles to recall if he specifically wished for power or if it was merely a byproduct of his circumstances. He confesses that his only driving thought at the time was a desperate, primal refusal to die, regardless of how pathetic his situation had become. He adds that he had been starving, resorting to eating anything he could find, even strange mushrooms and bones, to survive, leaving his companion to realize that his strength was born from sheer, unadulterated desperation. He reflects on his journey, admitting that his strength is not a gift but a consequence of consuming strange, otherworldly things that continue to alter his very nature. Ragnar listens intently, noting that the trust Wazu has earned from others and the divine protection surrounding Mir are forces that shape his path. The conversation shifts as he is reminded of his unique, almost magnetic ability to draw people toward him, a power that seems to define his presence. He awkwardly deflects the observation, struggling to define his relationships while maintaining his human guise, though his companions remain skeptical of his claims of isolation. Admitting his fear of losing his humanity, he resolves to stop consuming dangerous substances, even as he acknowledges the terrifying strength he has already gained. Suddenly, the ground beneath them reacts, a surge of corruption erupting from the swamp with a sickening, visceral sound. As the miasma intensifies, he realizes the swamp is not merely a place but a living, hostile entity, and despite the danger, he remains strangely unaffected. From the depths of the toxic fog, a monstrous creature emerges, its jagged teeth bared in a predatory grin. The beast lunges with a piercing screech, its corrosive fluids melting the earth, forcing the group to realize that even a single drop of its essence spells certain death. Ignoring the warnings, he recklessly charges forward, determined to test his own limits against the monster, leaving his companions to watch in horror. He suddenly paused, his eyes widening as he sensed a faint, lingering presence nearby. Turning his attention to the ground, he dismissed the minor disturbance as a triviality, though his companion remained wary. Reflecting on the encounter, he recalled a similar red marble he had seen before, wondering if the two were connected. As he examined the object, it suddenly fractured in his grip, leaving him to ponder if it was merely a trick of the light. The conversation shifted to the toxic swamp, with his ally noting that while they had intended to burn it down, the current situation required a different approach. He stared at the bubbling sludge, his expression unreadable as he contemplated the strange substance. Ignoring his companion's frantic protests, he plunged his hand into the liquid, declaring it tasted like sweet citrus fruit before gulping it down. Because of his reckless consumption, he collapsed onto the ground, the swamp's viscous contents gurgling within him. The sounds of his distress echoed across the clearing as he struggled to process the potent, swamp-born liquid. Finally, he exhaled a long, weary breath, his stomach visibly distended from the bizarre, magical feast. He lay there, still recovering, as Ragnar scolded him for his recklessness. Despite the concern, he remained characteristically carefree, insisting that everything would turn out fine, even as the ground beneath them began to emit a strange, luminous glow. Suddenly, he was engulfed by a brilliant, blinding light that erupted from the earth, leaving him bewildered as to the source of the phenomenon. Suspended within the radiance, he felt a profound sense of warmth, whispering a quiet word of gratitude to the mysterious force. As the light faded, a gentle, ethereal voice echoed in his mind, thanking him for his kindness and leaving him to wonder about the identity of the speaker. The light dissipated, revealing him collapsed on the ground once more. Ragnar rushed to his side, shocked to see that his stomach, previously distended from the toxic sludge, had returned to its normal size. High above the landscape, a massive, winged silhouette soared through the night sky, its presence casting a long shadow over the mountains. Observing from afar, a voice mused on his nature, noting that his actions were far from ordinary and that he possessed a power that defied conventional understanding. The observer continued, acknowledging that his soft-hearted nature and desire to protect others were exactly why he had been chosen and why he had earned such deep affection. The great dragon looked down at him, offering a solemn vow to lend its immense strength whenever he might require it. With the pact sealed, the dragon declared them best friends forever, soaring into the night as he looked on, still reeling from the surreal encounter. He laughed heartily, acknowledging the absurdity of his recent feat, while his companion marveled at his ability to survive the toxic swamp. Despite the light-hearted banter, he couldn't help but feel a lingering sluggishness, a physical reminder of the poison he had ingested. The conversation shifted to more pressing matters as his ally insisted he rest, promising to handle the rewards for their recent efforts. He listened as they discussed the gratitude of others, specifically mentioning that Tata-san had been saved from the swamp's threat. The mood darkened when they revealed they had gathered enough evidence to finally bring down the corrupt city lord. Because of the looming threat of a kidnapping attempt, he agreed to stay by Tata-san's side to ensure her safety through the night. Later, he found himself struggling with the aftereffects of his ordeal, his body rejecting the lingering toxins. His recovery was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a divine figure, the goddess of Mother Earth, who arrived with an unexpected and overwhelming presence. The deity showered him with intense gratitude and blessings, leaving him completely flustered and desperate for her to stop. As the divine encounter concluded, he realized with dismay that his status card had been altered yet again, his stats skyrocketing to absurd levels. He stood in the street, listening as his companion suggested he find a place to rest, noting that his body would soon adjust to the strain of his recent growth. As he turned to leave, he accidentally bumped into a hooded stranger, prompting a quick and awkward apology from both parties. The stranger, noticing his deathly pale complexion, teased him about looking like a ghost, and asked if he required an antidote for his condition. He clarified that he was merely an adventurer, not a merchant, though the stranger offered to show him some items regardless. The stranger leaned in close, causing him to recoil in surprise and stammer an apology, desperate to simply find a place to rest. A tense silence hung between them as the stranger stared intently, leaving him unsettled and wondering what the individual wanted. Dismissing the strange encounter, he laughed off the interaction, marveling at how carefree the stranger seemed to be. The stranger, who introduced himself as Shiro, waved goodbye and expressed a hope to trade with him again in the future. Left alone once more, he pondered the oddity of the meeting, quickly refocusing his thoughts on his primary mission, protecting Tata. He walked toward the mansion, greeting the day with a determined spirit as he prepared for the challenges ahead. He arrived to find his companions waiting, his pale complexion immediately drawing their concern. They chided him for his tardiness, fearing he had fallen victim to swamp toxins, but he brushed off their worries with a strained laugh. Ignoring their questions, he insisted that the matter at hand was far more pressing than any poison, urging them to focus on the gravity of their current situation. Before he could finish his explanation, his strength failed him entirely. He collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud, leaving his companions stunned and silent. As they rushed to his side, shouting his name in alarm, the distant view of the city loomed, indifferent to his sudden collapse. A vast, desolate landscape stretched out, silent and empty. Elsewhere, a dark figure watched from the heights as a chaotic horde of monsters surged toward the city, their roars echoing through the air. The cloaked observer mused that while the red orbs had not yielded the specific result he desired, they would certainly be enough to incite the chaos he sought, while the unconscious youth remained oblivious to the encroaching threat. The guild hall doors burst open as a frantic adventurer rushes in, shouting for the guild master to address a dire emergency. He reports that a massive horde of at least 1,000 goblins is currently advancing toward the southern borders of Lynn. Elsewhere, the young man awakens to find himself resting in her lap, apologizing for the trouble his collapse has caused. She reassures him, noting that surviving the ordeal of the poison swamp was a testament to his incredible strength. He suddenly grabs her, his expression intense as he demands to know if he is still truly human. She stares back, stunned by his desperate plea for her to touch him and confirm his nature. As his heart races, he frantically questions if there is anything strange about his current state. Their intimate moment is abruptly shattered when the door slams open, and she rushes in with water, surprised to find him awake. She expresses deep gratitude on behalf of the capital's citizens for his success in clearing the poison swamp. The conversation shifts as they press him for details, questioning how a human could possibly possess the power to neutralize such a lethal threat. He attempts to deflect her probing questions about his strength, but she presses him, playfully teasing him about the secrets he keeps hidden behind his seemingly normal exterior. She leans in close, her expression softening as she whispers that she truly believes he is human, despite the lingering anxieties surrounding his immense power. Her gaze remains fixed on him, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she reaffirms her trust in his nature. He meets her eyes, visibly moved by her unwavering faith, and promises that he will remain the same person he has always been. The intimate moment is abruptly shattered by a sudden, chaotic noise erupting from outside, drawing their attention toward the window. Ninya bursts into the room, breathless and panicked, to deliver the dire news. A massive horde of goblins is marching toward the capital. She explains that the guild has issued an emergency call for all adventurers, as scouts have confirmed the enemy numbers exceed 1,000, leaving everyone to wonder if even the strongest masters can hold them back. He stands with a newfound resolve, his expression hardening as he declares that it is time for him to move and face the threat head-on. She watches him with tearful, pleading eyes, begging him not to push himself too far in the coming conflict. He reassures her that he will keep her safe, entrusting her care to the others before turning to depart for the battlefield. He turned away from her, offering a final, reassuring promise that he would return soon. As he departed, her hand reached out to squeeze his, a silent plea for his safety lingering in the air. The atmosphere at the city gates was chaotic, with a restless crowd clamoring for the guards to open the way so they could confront the goblin threat. Amidst the clamor, voices rose in confusion and desperation, questioning why the adventurers who had already gone out were not receiving the reinforcements they clearly needed. He pushed through the throng, his eyes widening in surprise as he spotted a familiar, armored figure amidst the tension. Approaching the man, he demanded to know the location of the goblins, noting the desperate struggle of the guards to keep the gates closed against the mounting pressure. The warrior explained the grim reality. Opening the gates now would mean certain annihilation for the capital, as the sheer number of enemies far exceeded their defensive capabilities. He listened intently as the gravity of the situation deepened. The choice between protecting the brave souls outside and the innocent civilians within the walls was an impossible burden. Frustration etched itself onto his face as he realized his own limitations, silently lamenting that he lacked the strength to single-handedly shift the balance of the conflict. Despite the doubt, he crouched low, his resolve hardening as he looked at the warrior and commanded him to leave the task to him. He quickly instructed the guards to open the gates upon his signal, suggesting that thinning the horde might create an opening for the others to join the fray. With a sudden burst of speed, he sprinted away, leaving the onlookers stunned and questioning his sudden departure. He didn't look back, his boots pounding against the ground as he accelerated toward the looming threat. Launching himself into the air, he soared over the wall, leaving the guards below in a state of utter disbelief. As he descended, the sheer scale of the goblin army became clear, a vast, writhing sea of monsters stretching out before him. He unleashed a devastating strike upon the vanguard, the resulting shockwave clearing a massive path through the enemy ranks. Turning back toward the city, he signaled to Orlando that the gates could finally be opened. He stood amidst the carnage he had wrought, smiling as he urged the adventurers to give their all in the coming battle. The gates swung wide, and the defenders surged forward with a roar, ready to meet the weakened enemy head-on. He entrusted the defense of the gate to Orlando, deciding to head off in search of others who might need his aid. He departs the immediate battlefield, leaving the defenders to call out their gratitude as he vanishes into the distance. Elsewhere, a warrior strains against the relentless tide of goblins, his blade flashing as he carves a path through the swarm. The combat intensifies as he struggles to hold his ground, cursing the endless waves of enemies while his allies desperately coordinate their next move to locate the goblin commander. Suddenly, he reappears among them, his casual arrival startling the group as he brushes off the gravity of the situation with a lighthearted greeting. He explains the dire nature of their predicament, pointing toward the looming presence of a monstrous entity known as the Goblin King, which commands the chaotic horde. The group debates their options, realizing that if they fail to eliminate the leader, the remaining goblins will scatter and terrorize the surrounding villages. A massive shockwave erupts from the northern gate, drawing their collective attention and sparking immediate panic about the safety of the city's defenses. The guild master arrives with grim news, confirming that a demon has breached the northern gate, throwing the situation into further disarray. He clarifies the horrific truth behind these transformations. Humans overwhelmed by excessive magical power lose their humanity, mutating into mindless, destructive beasts. As the gravity of the situation sinks in, he observes the physical toll of this corruption, noting that the transformation is absolute and irreversible. He turned away from his companions, shouting a quick promise to return after securing the northern gate, leaving them behind as he sprinted toward the unfolding crisis. As he departed, his allies remained behind, their faces etched with deep concern. One of them, unable to bear the uncertainty of the distant explosion, broke away from the group to pursue him, desperate to ensure his safety. The sudden, violent impact of a dark force striking from the shadows caught her completely off guard, leaving her stunned as the assailant revealed its presence with a brutal, swift blow. She screamed in terror as the shadowy figure seized her, its form twisted and monstrous. She realized with horror that this creature was not merely a demon, but a corrupted being, and as it gloated about its power, she recognized the twisted features of a familiar face. The creature laughed maniacally, holding her captive as it boasted of its mastery over demons and goblins, while in the distance, he arrived on the scene, his eyes narrowing as he witnessed the nightmare unfolding before him. A monstrous horde of dark, hulking creatures descends upon the city gates, their presence signaling a dire threat to the peace of the realm. As the panic spreads, the townspeople are urged to retreat to safety, while Wazu stands firm, his gaze fixed on the encroaching danger. He spots the creatures and surges forward, his resolve hardening as he prepares to confront the nightmare head-on. The beasts let out a deafening roar, and he realizes with a jolt that their features are disturbingly familiar. He watches in horror as a mysterious black substance erupts from the monsters, realizing it is the same dark force he has encountered before. Without hesitation, he lunges into the fray, delivering a powerful, decisive strike that pierces through the darkness. He confronts the tragic reality of their transformation, lamenting that once they have become demons, there is no path back to humanity. He makes a solemn vow to stop them, determined to end their suffering by any means necessary, even if it means using his own power. With a final, sorrowful farewell, he unleashes his strength, putting the corrupted creatures to rest. The onlookers watch in awe, whispering rumors of the mysterious and powerful dragon tamer who saved them. He assured his companions that he would head toward Regensan, leaving them to manage the remaining goblins while reinforcements were on the way. As he sprinted away, the others watched in disbelief, whispering about his incredible strength and the rumors of him being a dragon tamer. Upon reaching his destination, he announced that the demons had been defeated, leaving those present stunned by his swift success. They expressed their profound gratitude, admitting that without his intervention, the battle against the goblin forces would have been lost. He offered a confident smile, acknowledging their trust and preparing to move forward. Despite the victory, a lingering sense of unease gnawed at him as he continued his journey. His focus shifted abruptly when he discovered Nenya, who was injured and distraught, revealing that Tata had been kidnapped by the city lord. He felt a surge of frustration and guilt, apologizing to her for his inability to protect their companion. The group gathered to discuss the grim reality of the situation, speculating on the city lord's malicious intentions toward Tata. He listened intently as the details of the lord's plan were laid bare: a forced marriage and imprisonment, all orchestrated while he was away. He listened as the young woman lamented her fate, her voice trembling with the admission that she would rather die than be forced into the arms of the city lord. She continued, explaining that she had only accepted this path to settle her family's debts, resigned to the fact that failure would lead to her becoming the Lord's wife. The weight of her words hung in the air as she questioned if she would ever experience true love, or if she was destined to remain trapped in a life she never desired. Despite the despair, she clung to a flicker of hope, dreaming of the day she could earn enough to pay off her debts and finally be free. Her thoughts turned inward, agonizing over her perceived lack of worth and the cruel reality that she was being taken from the one person who truly cared for her. Tears streamed down her face as she recalled the sister who had always smiled for her, no matter how dire their circumstances had become. He acknowledged her pain with a solemn nod, confirming that he understood the depth of her suffering and the bond she shared with her sister. The battle intensified around them. His allies struggled to hold back the overwhelming tide of enemies, their strength failing under the sheer weight of the opposition. Urging him to act, they insisted that he was the only one capable of rescuing Tata from the city lord's clutches, regardless of the danger they faced. He hesitated, torn between the need to save her and the guilt of abandoning his comrades, until a desperate plea for guidance forced him to make a choice. He finds himself suddenly confronted by the massive, draconic presence of Ragnar, who looms over the battlefield with an air of casual dominance. The dragon dismisses the surrounding chaos, urging him to leave the defense of this location to him and attend to more pressing matters elsewhere. Overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, he breaks into a wide, relieved grin, his eyes shining with newfound hope. He reflects on his life, realizing that he has never encountered such an unexpected and powerful ally until this very moment. With a surge of renewed energy, he sprints away from the front lines, calling out his gratitude to his draconic friend. Ragnar watches him depart, a low, rumbling sound escaping his throat as he prepares for the coming onslaught. The dragon turns his attention to a soldier named Ragnar, demanding a precise report on the enemy's numbers and the presence of any high-ranking threats. Upon learning of the massive enemy force, Ragnar commands the soldiers to retreat, preparing to unleash his devastating fire upon the encroaching army. The soldiers watch in awe as the dragon incinerates the opposition, their morale soaring as they realize the tide of battle has turned. Amidst the carnage, Ragnar addresses a man, coldly noting that he has no time to waste, especially when the man's daughter, Lula, is involved in the conflict. The massive dragon bellows a rallying cry to the adventurers below, urging them forward into the heat of battle. Inside the nearby manor, a desperate voice cries out, pleading for release. She recoils in horror as her captor looms over her, claiming her as his own and dismissing her protests with cruel arrogance. He sneers at her, mocking her status and asserting that no one else would ever desire someone like her. The tormentor continues his verbal assault, cruelly labeling her past experiences as nothing more than common encounters. She trembles, her voice shaking as she attempts to defend the sanctity of her past, insisting that her first time was meaningful. Her defiance only fuels his malice, as he coldly declares that he will be the one to claim what she has saved for another. With tears streaming down her face, she screams that she will never belong to him, for her heart already belongs to someone else. The villain ignores her pleas, his dark intent clear as he prepares to force his will upon her, leaving her in a state of absolute despair. Suddenly, the tension breaks as Wazu arrives, offering a calm reassurance that the battle is ending and she is safe. He offered a reassuring smile, dismissing her concerns about being a burden and confirming that Ninya had alerted him to her plight. Noticing her state, he promptly offered his shirt to cover her, his tone casual despite the gravity of the situation. The intruder, stunned by his sudden appearance, demanded to know how he had bypassed the mansion's defenses, while she looked on in disbelief at his nonchalant explanation of simply jumping over the wall. The man sputtered in denial, insisting that 30 B-rank adventurers were guarding the premises and that no one could have breached their perimeter. He gestured toward a pile of unconscious guards, coolly remarking that he had simply dealt with them all to ensure the safety of the mansion. As the man unleashed a desperate, arrogant tirade about his superior water and flame powers, he remained unfazed, unimpressed by the display of magical force. With a final, cold declaration, he prepared to end the threat, his resolve absolute as he stood between the villain and his victim. A mysterious figure cloaked in shadow observes the landscape from a high vantage point, musing on the unexpected turn of events and the peculiar strength of the one they are tracking. The observer chuckles to themselves, noting how the target differs significantly from others they have encountered, finding amusement in the chaos unfolding below. Below, a powerful adversary unleashes a torrent of magical energy, screaming of their newfound might, while those nearby cry out in terror for their champion to flee. He stands his ground amidst the devastation, calmly inviting his opponent to strike with everything they have, his resolve unshaken by the display of force. As the pressure mounts, his companions beg him to abandon the fight and escape, but he remains steadfast, reassuring them that there is no cause for alarm. He turns to them with a confident, reassuring smile, insisting that he is completely fine despite the overwhelming power directed his way. Tears welling in her eyes, his companion questions the necessity of his sacrifice, her voice trembling with concern for his safety. She asks why he would go to such lengths for someone like her, just as a massive explosion erupts, leaving the attacker stunned that he remains unscathed. In the wake of the blast, he looks directly at her and declares his feelings, his expression earnest and devoid of any hesitation. The sudden confession leaves him flustered and shouting in embarrassment, while she stands frozen, her face flushed with a deep, overwhelmed blush. He stood frozen in a state of mortification, his mind reeling from the impulsive confession that had just escaped his lips. Overwhelmed by self-doubt, he insisted that he was unworthy of her affection, claiming his past made him unfit for her. He turned away, his posture slumped as he lamented that his very body felt stained by his history. She refused to accept his self-deprecation, firmly countering his claims by insisting on her perception of his beauty. Despite her reassurance, he continued to spiral, confessing that his past involved intimate encounters with many others. With a sudden, desperate outburst, he shouted that none of those past experiences mattered to him anymore. He looked directly at her, declaring with raw intensity that his only truth was his feelings for her. She stared back, her eyes wide and glistening with a mixture of shock and burgeoning emotion. As she processed his words, a sudden, violent interruption shattered the moment as an enraged man lunged at them. The attacker roared in fury, accusing him of defiling his woman, and struck with a powerful, concussive blow. He collapses, his body finally succumbing to the exhaustion of the battle as he clutches a mysterious, dark orb. As he regains his footing, his companions gather around, relieved to see him alive and the immediate threat of the goblins neutralized. He brushes off their concerns, his voice heavy with self-reproach as he laments his lack of strength, while Tata offers him comfort. The tension breaks as he shares a genuine, weary smile with Ninya, acknowledging her safety and the relief of the moment. Nearby, the city begins to stir, the quiet streets reflecting the calm that has finally returned to their lives. They stand together in the aftermath, a small group of survivors finding solace in each other's presence. The chaos that once threatened the city of Lynn is officially quelled, thanks to the collective efforts of the group. The next day dawns, casting a peaceful light over the landscape as the city begins its recovery. He stands alone, feeling the crisp morning air and deciding that today is the perfect day to invite Tata on an outing. The city stretches out before him, a sprawling testament to the peace they have fought so hard to protect. He contemplated his upcoming plans, specifically the prospect of inviting Tata to travel with him, though he worried about the potential for misunderstanding. His focus shifted to the bedside, where he and his companions discussed the grim reality of their captive, who remained unresponsive and in critical condition. They compared notes on the situation, noting that the three adventurers known as the Black Blaze were suffering from the same mysterious affliction. He listened intently as the details emerged. When defeated, these individuals would vomit a red orb that shattered upon impact, a phenomenon he had witnessed previously with the elf in the village. The conversation turned to a mysterious hooded figure seen distributing these corrupting orbs, suggesting an external source of power rather than natural evolution. He tasked Orlando with the investigation, acknowledging that while the hooded man might have already fled the city, tracking him remained their top priority. The discussion took an unexpected turn when he was asked about Tata's whereabouts, leaving him visibly startled by the sudden inquiry. They explained that Tata had left Lynn with her family, escorted by Garrett's subordinates, due to concerns regarding the lingering loyalty of the Count's former associates. He was struck by the revelation, his composure shattering as he realized he had been completely unaware of her departure. The weight of the news settled over him as he looked out toward the city, the peaceful day he had envisioned now replaced by a sudden, urgent uncertainty. He desperately pressed for answers, his voice tight with urgency as he demanded to know where Tata had gone. She stood firm, explaining that Tata had insisted on secrecy for the safety of her family, leaving him excluded from the departure. Standing in the rain, he felt the weight of the separation as she apologized for the lack of information. He realized that he had no right to interfere with her choice, accepting that her peace was more important than his own desires. With a final, somber gesture, she offered her regards, the silence between them heavy with unspoken emotion. As she turned to leave, he could only watch her silhouette fade into the distance, a quiet thank you lingering in the air. He remained motionless, the rain washing over him as he processed the sudden emptiness of the city. Standing alone in the downpour, he let out a weary sigh, feeling the sting of being left behind once again. Elsewhere, an elven woman sighed deeply, her expression one of weary contemplation. She mused to herself about the complexity of his social circle, admitting that while she had hoped to join his company, the reality of his existing bonds left her feeling somewhat dejected. She stood amidst the quiet, her mind swirling with a mix of frustration and longing as she demanded to be let off. Unable to contain her inner turmoil, she sighed repeatedly, lamenting the danger that forced her to return to the city while leaving him behind. Her thoughts turned to him, and she reconciled herself to the painful reality that they would not cross paths again for at least half a year. The realization struck her with sudden force. She had essentially cut him out of her life and fled, a decision that now felt utterly terrible. When questioned about her motives, she could no longer hide the truth. Her eyes widened as she confessed her love for him with unbridled intensity. The sheer weight of her own admission left her momentarily stunned, her expression shifting from passion to a look of pure, wide-eyed shock. Suddenly, she turned back toward the carriage, calling out to halt their departure, desperate to ask one final, burning question. Her heart raced as she stood there, her posture betraying the nervous anticipation of what she was about to uncover. She began to describe the man she sought, painting a picture of a surprisingly strong individual whose dark hair and cute appearance had captured her interest. As the conversation unfolded, a startling realization dawned on both women. They were both pursuing the same man, leading to the shocking conclusion that they were part of a harem. Rin gazes downward, her expression a mixture of bashfulness and deep contemplation as she processes her feelings. Beside her, Tata covers her mouth, her eyes wide with a sudden, poignant realization. They share a quiet moment of understanding, acknowledging that Wazu's kindness inevitably draws others to him, just as it had captured Salona's heart. The two women exchange a knowing look, silently accepting the shared nature of their affection for him. Tata and Lynn begin to gush about Wazu's virtues, marveling at his pure heart, his unassuming nature, and the way he protects others without hesitation. As the conversation deepens, they come to a startling conclusion. They are both already part of Wazu's circle of devotion. Tata leans in, her curiosity piqued, and asks Lynn to share the stories of what transpired between her and Wazu, promising she feels no jealousy. Lynn smiles warmly, agreeing to the exchange, eager to hear about Tata's experiences as well. A soft, contented laughter drifts over the quiet town as they settle in to share their secrets. Nearby, a small, furry creature chirps happily, nuzzling against its companion in the peaceful afternoon light. She wept openly, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her sorrow as she buried her face in her hands. Nearby, others discussed the source of this gloom. Wazu had remained confined to his bed for 5 days, refusing to eat. The conversation turned to his past, noting that he had left his hometown wounded, seeking healing before he could ever consider returning. They questioned the true purpose of his journey, concluding that their role was merely to observe his future, rather than force the connections he had once desired. Despite the concern, they realized that the path to making friends was a journey he had to undertake on his own terms. Suddenly, the silence was shattered as an acquaintance burst into his room, demanding he wake up and face the world. Ignoring his lethargy, the intruder challenged him directly, declaring an intent to spar and demanding a match. He tried to dismiss the provocation, warning that such a fight was futile, but his opponent refused to back down, charging forward with renewed vigor. The clash was swift. He effortlessly parried the assault, leaving his attacker frustrated by his lack of effort. As the dust settled, the challenger admitted defeat, impressed that even after days of rest, he remained untouchable. He sat in silence, admitting he hadn't moved much, while his companion pressed him on how his body felt and questioned his recent defeat. The warrior winced at the blunt assessment, retorting that such a loss would only be true if the opponent were truly stronger. He brushed off the advice to get moving, noting that being told by Ragnar to harbor hatred for him was a tiresome burden. His visitor grew agitated, declaring that he couldn't stand seeing him hiding in bed and demanded to know why he had come to rub salt in his wounds. The man confirmed he had something important to say, his voice rising with urgency. He pointed an accusatory finger, shouting that his current behavior was completely uncool. The listener scrambled to clarify his meaning, but his companion cut him off, insisting that their perspectives were simply on different levels. He continued, stating that as a man, he pitted his current situation and found his lack of drive truly uncool. The recluse looked up, bewildered by the sudden outburst and the intensity of his visitor's lecture. His visitor softened his tone, confessing that he had been shocked and impressed by his strength against the goblins, and that he respected him deeply even while feeling conflicted. He gazes out at the horizon, his voice barely a whisper as he confesses that he had always aspired to be like the man standing before him. The warrior dismisses the sentiment, retorting that he is merely a guard, not a man capable of protecting others. Because of this self-deprecation, the listener bristles, insisting that he cannot remain silent while someone he deeply admires hides away in isolation over a woman. He questions why such harsh words are being directed at him, struggling to understand why his companion views him as a friend. The companion presses on, his expression grave as he demands that he get back on his feet, emphasizing the seriousness of his intent. As the tension hangs in the air, he asks if his companion would be willing to listen to his perspective, to which the other readily agrees. He admits with a heavy heart that his internal strength fails to match his physical prowess. He explains that despite being surrounded by people, he feels a profound sense of inadequacy, leading him to seek out friends merely to fill the void within himself. He looks at his own hand, lamenting that even with great strength, he remains alone, envying those who can truly walk alongside others. The realization settles over him. As time passes, the weight of his isolation only grows more unbearable. He suddenly reaches out, firmly tapping her on the forehead to break her somber mood. The warrior scolds him for his self-deprecating attitude, demanding to know why he speaks, as if his strength is worthless just because he lacks companions. He continues, insisting that while the world may praise Ragnar, he knows the truth. The real hero is the young man standing before him. She looks up, her expression softening into a gentle smile as she reminds him that even if the situation has passed, the fact that he made her smile is more than enough. Turning the question back to him, she asks what he believes the purpose of true power is, challenging him to consider if he is the type of man who would disregard her happiness just to force a friendship. As he contemplates her words, he reflects on the image of a traveler known throughout the world, someone who solves problems and brings smiles to others along their journey. The faces of those he has helped flash through his mind, their expressions of gratitude and joy serving as a testament to his impact. A realization dawns on him, his eyes brightening with a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. With a genuine, radiant smile, he agrees, finally accepting that his path has meaning. Watching from afar, his companions celebrate his breakthrough, relieved and happy that he has finally realized his own worth. He stood before his companions, declaring his intent to become a knight, a revelation that left them visibly stunned. The veteran warrior beside him acknowledged the ambition, noting that if he truly desired this path, he possessed the necessary skills to pursue it. Because of this sudden shift in his demeanor, the veteran explained that they would need to travel to the royal capital to formalize his path toward knighthood. The news of his departure brought tears to the eyes of those who had grown fond of him, as they struggled to accept that their regular customer was truly leaving. They gathered around him, expressing their gratitude for his contributions and urging him to return to the guild whenever he could. As they handed him a generous reward for his past missions, he was taken aback by their kindness and the sheer amount they offered. The veteran then presented him with a special badge, explaining that it would grant him significant benefits when presented at the Adventurers Guild headquarters in the royal capital. Amidst the farewells, a brief, tense exchange occurred regarding a mysterious elder sister, though the moment quickly passed. With a final wave and a heartfelt expression of gratitude, he bid farewell to everyone who had supported him. He walked through the gates, leaving Lynn behind to begin his new journey. He watched as Ragnar and his family took to the skies, returning to their castle together. With that departure, he began his long journey toward the royal capital, accompanied by Mir and Orlando. The two companions urged their carriage forward, desperate to catch up to him. They worried that he might have already departed from Lynn, prompting an urgent plea for their driver to move faster. Orlando chuckled to himself, finding the situation amusing as he contemplated the bright future awaiting his friend. Meanwhile, the women left behind marveled at the thought of him being approached by two beauties. They lamented the difficulty of seeing his bitter expression, wishing they had brought him along with them instead. Ninya sighed, realizing that she and the others were also caught in the same predicament. The group erupted in a flurry of excitement, jokingly questioning if a new applicant for his harem had appeared, though they quickly insisted he was merely a bodyguard. They mused that his charm would only increase in the future, jokingly labeling him a sinful person for the trouble he caused their hearts. The journey continues across the vast, rolling plains as the travelers press forward through the wilderness, eventually encountering a formidable beast that blocks their path. Exhausted from the exertion, he calls for a brief respite, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he collapses to the ground. He dismisses the soldier's complaints, noting that comparing his own stamina to that of a trained professional is futile, especially given the toll their recent battles have taken. The soldier admits to feeling a deep sense of envy, confessing that he struggles to keep pace with the rapid growth he witnesses in his companion. He acknowledges the divine protection granted by the goddesses, yet he remains humble, recognizing that such blessings are only part of the equation for his increasing strength. He reflects on a pivotal moment when he was near death, revealing that it was not divine intervention that saved him, but Mir, who fed him something that granted him the ability to consume anything. He casually consumes a toxic substance, explaining that these strange dietary habits are the secret to his rapid power gains, much to the shock of his companion. The soldier voices his frustration, lamenting that despite his own efforts and the defeat of many monsters, his status remains stagnant compared to the effortless progress he observes in his friend. He offers a cynical observation, noting that such strength is never truly effortless, and that his companion's pessimistic nature is precisely why others find him so reliable. He reflects on Orlando's aspiration to become a knight, musing that the desire to be a hero who helps those in trouble is truly admirable. Despite the ambition, his companion remains humble, doubting his own ability to quickly rise through the ranks and command troops. He listens as Mir interjects with a playful but firm declaration, insisting that she will personally oversee his training to ensure he grows stronger before they reach the royal capital. With the training plan set, he watches as they prepare for rest, grateful for the chance to sleep after a long day. As they settle by the campfire, he wonders aloud about the nature of Mir's transformation, marveling at the convenience of her space-time magic. He learns that while she can currently take human form, she does not yet possess the power to do so at will, according to Ragnar. His companion notes with a smile that the dragon who saved his life seems deeply attached to him, staying by his side every day. He is teased about his romantic history, as his friend points out that the one who would be his wife is already right there beside him. He brushes off the comment, focusing instead on his own goal to defeat 100 monsters by the following day, even if it leaves him exhausted. As the morning light breaks over the landscape, he wakes up, ready to face the challenges of the new day. He sat in the dim light, his expression hardening as he confronted the unsettling reality of their situation, questioning why they would accept such a suspicious arrangement. Disturbed by the voices he perceived, he turned to his companion, urging him to wake up and acknowledge the potential threat lurking nearby. The realization deepened within him that their peaceful existence was a luxury, one that blinded them to the manipulative nature of those who sought to exploit others for personal gain. As the sinister intent of the unseen speakers became clear, he sprang into action, compelled by the urgent need to intervene and protect those marked for harm. A group of ruthless bandits surrounds their captives, their leering faces filled with malice as they prepare to subject the women to their cruel whims. She defiantly challenges them, demanding they keep their hands off her subordinates, while a subordinate calls out to her in desperation. Bound and helpless, she is mocked by her captors, who cruelly insult her appearance, dismissing her dignity with crude remarks. From the shadows of the forest, Wazu and Orlando observe the scene, their senses heightened as they pinpoint the location of the enemy. They quickly assess the dire situation, realizing that innocent lives are in immediate danger and that they must intervene without hesitation. With a sudden burst of speed, they charge into the clearing, catching the bandits completely off guard. Orlando steps forward to confront the leaders, while Wazu prepares to engage the rest, their confidence infuriating the hulking brutes. The bandits reveal themselves as the infamous Dagondo brothers, but Wazu dismisses their reputation with a fierce, defiant shout. He lunges into the fray, his movements a blur of focused aggression as he strikes at the captors to protect the women. The clash erupts in a flurry of motion, his strike landing with devastating force against the enemy's defenses. He strikes with decisive force, his blade cutting through the chaos as the bandits are swiftly incapacitated. With the immediate threat neutralized, he surveys the scene, noting that the skirmish has finally come to an end. He approaches the captives to ensure their safety, while Mir, having returned to human form, offers a bottle of water to those in need. As they tend to the survivors, he checks on Mir, who confirms she is unharmed. He turns his attention to the armored woman, struggling briefly with the intricate fastenings of her gear as he works to free her. Once freed, she introduces herself as the close aide to the second princess of the Raymond Kingdom and captain of the Cassie squad, gesturing toward her rescued subordinates. She expresses her gratitude for the rescue, though she remains visibly embarrassed by the vulnerability of their situation. Suddenly, a magical ring on her finger begins to glow, catching everyone's attention with its unexpected light. He watches in surprise as she answers the call, realizing the ring serves as a long-distance communication device. Through the ring, a voice confirms that they have reached Mima village and were alerted to the attack on her squad, bringing a sense of relief to the group. She finds herself caught off guard when the voice on the other end of the communication ring addresses her with a familiar, reverent title, Naminishima. The sudden shift in tone leaves her visibly startled, while Wazu and Orlando look on, equally confused by the mysterious caller's intimate knowledge of her identity.